I was pinged into that room, and anytime anybody would like to give a, you know, somewhat expert opinion, they would shut them down, and they were like, "No, no, no, you tell
Yes.
me, how do you feel right now?"
Okay, I can confirm that has nothing to do with the platform. With things with stuff about like I've hosted cybersecurity like things. I think today I hosted one of the largest ones or helped organize one with the Red Line with George Lamore stuff with things. But that was like we did one for solar wind stuff. That was like a good 4,000 or 5,000 at a time, and we went for like 2 days on that one. So I mean, over the course of the entire thing, I think it was probably like 40,000-50,000 people through their total. So it's not about the platform. The platform can support it. You just need to have the right people on this stage. Apparently, that one didn't have it.
Tyler, nothing made me appreciate you more than going into these rooms yesterday. I mean, I was just
Oh, go
Yes,
I
Your
was
Chloe.
like, now
moderation
Go
was
that
terrible.
my sister signed in from Iran actually, and I said, and I've invited her to your room. Now it's like we don't even talk to each other. You know, we don't have time to talk sometimes, but we meet up here in your room here, and I've got friends, and every time I go sit down in a meeting or something, I'm like, you like technology, you got to come to this room. So now people come in here and we start talking. And last night I was like, now you hear the difference between someone who knows what to do, someone who knows how to how to run a room, and someone who doesn't. I mean, it was like 8,000 people at some point, and every time somebody wanted to say something, they were like, "Hey, you, shut up! Close that mic, close that mic. They can't speak." And it
yes,
was
but
just,
you
Even in the
should follow
smaller
the
rooms, that had like really
and
technically competent people, they didn't have a mic control. They didn't have essentially
it was
decent
just
moderation.
getting.
Well,
I mean, I went to sleep thinking like, am I going to wake up? Is there going to be a world tomorrow? Is there going to be a complete meltdown? Is the planet going to be around? I mean, it was just such it was just extreme. And I just couldn't wait to wake up this morning and come to this room and say hi and just say, hey, Tyler, we appreciate you. That's all I got to say.
thanks.
And you had the rooms that they turn into a conspiracy theory room. They had the title with they had the WhatsApp down, and then everyone was talking about um, celebrities covering their eyes and the hush hush. It was stupid, man. It was so
The
But it just
survivors
shows
never
you
But you
make
have
that
to
it.
how
follow
much.
the moderators.
You
The
know what's
amazing
funny though?
moderators. Please follow them.
There's an important point buried in here, which is when Facebook went down, Facebook, Instagram, and
It's what I said this morning.
Where did they go?
yeah. But here's my point: is that there was one of the biggest rooms in a while here in Clubhouse, and it's because when important ish things go down, people want answers, and they fled here because when they went.
Exactly.
Rats fleeing a sinking ship.
Well,
They
no, but my
gathered on the
point
life
is,
raft.
isn't that interesting that in people's minds, people who know about Clubhouse, something important happened. One of their instincts was to go to Clubhouse to find out what happened. This is actually a not trivial thing because in the future, when the large things happen, it's very possible that people's instincts will be better than Twitter, because in Twitter you can't really figure out what's really going on. And right,
too much trolling.
Toom is just not designed for it. Where Clubhouse it is, this is a really interesting example of how this format is conductive and kind of ideal of it's kind of the best suited of all the
It
social
bridges
platforms
connect.
for
It bridges
addressing
connections,
large
right?
social issues about what's really going on.
The very early days of Twitter, you could do that with things, but the noise quickly drowned it out.
You need good moderation, and that's the net.
Okay, thank you. So, but yeah, Twitter used to be the best game in town for addressing this. But I think Clubhouse has demonstrated that it was even better than Twitter yesterday, for potentially better, depending on who's hosting the room and who's in the room and who has the ability. Because a moderator in that context should have said, okay, everybody, we have 8,000 people here. Who has friends that might know what's going on? Let's try and get them up.
120 people on this stage, and not a one of them with a clue.
Well, first of all,
Not
that
at all.
No, but
having
they
Because
tried.
even
But
if
they
they
tried.
were, they were not
Tyler,
listening to
Tyler,
them.
to be fair, several times saying somebody came up, says okay, and he says, I know something. So are you working for Facebook? No, but but my friend or something like that. They were trying to get some information. Fair
right.
enough, and they were asking for it, but in a kind of a not a very conducive way. But absolutely, fully agree. You have a flood of people. Me too. saying nothing works here on my end when the WhatsApp side, so let's go to Clubhouse because I can talk to people,
Right.
and we can find out, and we
Right.
can actually check on, who knows something, to not have conspiracy theories, but really,
Was it?
contact people who know.
Okay,
In
everyone, let's
tech
talk about
news,
border gateway
I
protocols. This
think.
is
It
fun.
was DNS related, right? Like that's what I
Okay, in
said
tech
earlier.
news, we have Michelle. So don't speculate. Let's Michelle talk.
No, but I think what they're saying is, Cheryl, it's not about the exactly what happened, but what Tyler and everybody else is saying is people's instinct to find about what current affairs when it happened to just log in into Clubhouse, trying to figure out what happens to whatever it is. Yesterday, for example, there was a room with thousands of people about Biden's, do not shut down the government and other things. Even the Ethiopian inauguration, they opened an impromptu room and there was like thousands of people. I couldn't believe it. So it's
Okay.
I think it's becoming a
Okay.
place for.
Okay. If you want the truth, let Michelle talk. And by the way, Tyler Lakeisha is in the audience.
I've invited up both Lakeisha and Aaron, but
If you can't get in, jump out and come in again.
yeah. So
Michelle.
yeah,
Hey, Tyler.
we'll hand it over to Michelle here because she works at Facebook, and it's just
Yep.
let's do that first, and we'll circle back to Tina and of course anyone else who wants to jump in. And I have the Cloudflare article, who was sort of the first to dissect it from a technical standpoint. But Michelle, any comments you want to make before we jump into this hot story?
Yeah, so I think it was interesting because I was actually in the room you were referring to, but I doubt there was any Facebook employee actually making comment during the outage. So it was kind of interesting to also see that some people might happen to claim they work with a company and just use the opportunity to share inaccurate information, actually. But it was it came from a network configuration, so that's what caused the outage. And obviously the team worked long hours to find the issue, so they actually had to go physically to the data centers to manually fix it. So yeah, I think that's what I can say at the moment, but there's nothing else, to be fair. So, and now everything is back, and now we kind of back to using I think the most disturbing part was not being able to actually access our internal tools, which
Right.
if in the middle of your workday, it's just like, okay, what the hell is happening? We
Yeah.
can't talk to each other, but we could email each other at least. So,
Right.
Did it work with badges too?
Is it
sorry?
true? Is it true that people had difficulty getting into the buildings because their badges were somehow tied to this?
That could be a possibility, but I'm not really going to comment to that because
Okay.
I don't know.
Yeah,
So
it was that was the conversation on Twitter that I saw as well. And as I heard Chris Fornoff say, the issue is a new word is entering the public lexicon, which is BPG, which is Border Gateway Protocol, which was at the heart of the issue. It's a very technical issue that's difficult to make an apt metaphor that's convenient for non-sysadmins.
I got one.
Go ahead.
You go to a restaurant and you don't know it's a new kind of ethnicity food. You've never eaten at that place before, and you go, "What's the best thing on the menu?" And essentially, you ask them, and they say, "Show me the chef's special." And they say, "Okay, cool. You want a soup? Yeah, I want a soup. All right." And they serve it up to you. This is what it does on a technical level because we can't memorize all the numbers on the internet of where everything is and the actual things in the phone book. The essentially what ends up happening is the DNS and it basically tells us essentially, yes, here's the best thing on the menu. It's right here. Well, in this case, someone took the server out back and shot him, which is very unfortunate. We didn't show up for work, and we're trying to basically find him, and the entire restaurant ground to halt because no one knows how to order anything anymore.
That is a good metaphor. Yeah, it's and another metaphor is that it's a map to tell you the best way to get to a place, and then the map disappeared.
It's a phone book. I mean, it's really just the white pages for us old schoolers, right?
Yeah, well, I think what non-geeks don't know is the websites are actually numbers, like phone numbers. And then what we use as names, like Facebook.com or Clubhouse.com or anything.com or .net or any of those names are just convenient kind of shortcuts in a weird way to get to actual phone numbers that they realized early on in the development of the internet. Oh shit, people are not going to be able to remember all these crazy numbers that go to all of these websites, and we need a more human friendly interface, which are these DNSs, domain names, DNs, and then you need a map of all of these things. And if the map falls apart, which it did in the case of Facebook, then temporarily no one can figure out how to connect the names to the numbers.
If they had done a different architecture, just even slight differentiations on this, like things like Google just wouldn't have come into existence just because like one of their main functions was just providing a map of what the hell is on the internet. I mean, if they had had better architectures at the beginning, you wouldn't have to have private companies fill in the gap. It's bizarre essentially seeing how very, very tiny architectural changes lead to like trillions of dollars essentially being structured one way or another in the economy.
So I again, to Aaron and Lakeisha, I've invited you both up, but I'm seeing that you're still in the audience with your hands raised, which is weird. But hopefully we get that sorted out. And that pretty much covers it. Was there any other interesting issues related to the outage other than people turned to Clubhouse, which I thought was brilliant? Because that means they associate Clubhouse with figuring out what's it. Clubhouse could in the future continue to scratch that very important itch, and it better than Twitter can. As I was saying before, Twitter, prior to the social audio phenomena of that Clubhouse popularized and pioneered, Twitter developed its source as a sort of reputation for going, because it's semi-immediate. It's not nearly as efficient as a group conversation, and especially if a properly modded Clubhouse room, and what's unfortunate was that it went out right around the same time that we had to close this room, and we were shutting down anyways. And I was like, oh, Facebook just died. Okay, well, I imagine it'll come back on. And we jumped out. We ended the tech news room right around the same time that the outage started.
If you kept it going, it would have been the largest room on Clubhouse for that time period.
Right. Well, especially because we would have had the sense to try and fish out people with strong sysadmin expertise who could
Well, we
really
had
figure it out.
Johan and I had realized it was the DNS because you could go to
Yeah.
the DNS
Yes.
propagation tables and see they were all gone.
Yes.
Johan, you could update your personal host files. Did that work, Johan? Did the host files work, or is it actually the border servers that went down?
Yeah. Well, to Chris's point, while Johan's waiting to reply, here's Johan. Go ahead,
the
Johan.
thing was that I tried to speak and I couldn't speak. The thing is here that it was the border gateway protocol that went down, and the error they have made at Facebook is that they had all their name servers on their
All of
own
them.
BGP. All the name servers, all these phone books were on their own network. So when their network went into binary space, none of them were reachable. If they would have followed even the most simple continuous protocol by hosting one of these servers outside of their own domain, the problem would have been minor for them. That they actually totally did fall off the BGP map, which is the actual name of the thing here. What happened is that, that we have these country codes, 44 for UK, 46 for Sweden, 1 for US, etc. The thing was that the telephone switchboard for the internet here didn't know the way to the Facebook country, their metaverse. So their metaverse were not to be dialed from any country anywhere in the world. So they were actually, in fact, having their own universe for a couple of days or hours rather. So the thing is, we lost them. We lost the quantum bridge to the Facebook network by them not having their name servers and falling off the BGP map. I think they now will break up their network into more of these AS numbers, the BGP routers, so they don't fall off all at the same time. And I guess they will scatter their name servers, probably host at Google. That would be a good advice because they actually have a very, very solid network. as well as putting one of their main name servers in the care of the ICANN, which is the ones that run the root servers for the internet. ICANN runs the name servers for Google, Microsoft, IBM, Digital actually still exists in the form of Hewlett Packard. They run the ones, but Facebook, they decided they didn't want to use the same hardware and infrastructure as the rest of the internet. They built their own. They really did get to pay the price. Oh God, this was a glorious evening.
So, on
I
just quick
just maybe
question.
want to add
What,
that I also just want to say we haven't really published the root cause, so I would look at most of it as hypothesis, but I do understand that it's there are a lot of plausible hypotheses.
Just throwing out a few random items here with things. A server configuration item like this, if it does end up being like that, there's probably other structural issues aside from just that one. I imagine it'll be a very, very expensive review. That whenever you basically sign one of these server contracts for any of the data farms, there is a lot of those, like, we want 4 nines, we want 5 nines, we want 6 nines, we want 7, 8 nines, however, of uptime with things. And those have very painful financial teeth clauses in those. And depending on where the finger points, those can be very, very pricey. One more thing to point out is things. The Meet Me rooms where all these servers are basically dedicated. If you PTR, you can actually see an image of one of these. There's about 100 of these worldwide, give or take, that are like, this is the actual part of the internet from a network perspective. Knowing which one of those little pipes, one of those little fiber optic cables to plug into, that's what those tables basically tell you, with the physical architecture of what's going on.
Chris, you want to
So what
explain
happens is
what?
when something went wrong, people getting able to physically get into the building apparently was an issue, which I find to be absolutely hilarious. Of like, oh crap, my badge won't scan. I need to get in. I need to reboot the internet. I need to reboot the Facebooks. So
Yeah,
yeah.
Chris, you want to
to
explain
add
what four five
to
nines are?
yeah, the thing, one of the other things here that actually have had quite a large impact that we're probably going to have the aftermath of today is that also not only did Facebook and Instagram, which is more of a leisure product, so to see, social networking, but also the Facebook Workplace went into oblivion,
Yeah,
and
that
that
was the
actually,
impressive part.
yeah, the thing is here that this really impacted businesses in a way that I guess we will see a lot of discussion of continuous planning. Not that we're going to see Facebook fall off the grid anytime soon, but the thing is here that the number of businesses that have a heavy impact by they couldn't use WhatsApp to contact their support.
Oh,
They
that's like entire
couldn't.
continents offline.
Yeah, and the
okay.
thing is that actually we have a couple of small islands outside of US. They are totally dependent on the Facebook networks that also was offline. So they
Africa for
couldn't.
WhatsApp. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or
So
India with
WhatsApp
WhatsApp.
was not. Yeah, WhatsApp was down, so you couldn't contact your support. Workplace was down, so you couldn't use your company's internal social network to get
Woo.
support and help for the business that you were operating. So yeah, the impact. I actually sent a message to Tyler about an hour ago that said that this might be the stones that break the back of the camel, that they will be forced to break up Facebook into different parties, because we were totally dependent on all their services. And when all of them went away at the same time, we had no way to know what had happened. There were actually theories that China has attacked Taiwan, and this was a coordinated attack to make sure that nobody knew about it until it was too late. You undone.
So,
So
Jan, just
Hold
quickly want to just like, okay. So it happened on the third layer. So BJP, basic BGP, where that's where actually happened. So just to assume at that point in time that it came in externally and wiped off pretty much all the routing tables all across the globe at once, which affected Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, and Oculus. All of it. Anything to do with the Facebook just not accessible. We are not talking about the domain server here. We are talking about the
No.
actual
Yeah.
IP routing
No, we've
tables
co-
like actually
we've
been wiped
covered this
off.
already, Karam. We've
Oh,
covered.
sorry, I
Yeah.
joined late. So okay.
So there was also an interesting point. It would be really interesting to see in the countries like Israel and I believe that Nigeria Michelle, that's testing out the Novi wallet? I mean, we have to assume that were people able to do transactions through the Novi wallet while the outage happened? Because that would be a really interesting point to figure out. Because they may have engineered it to be withstand so that it works offline in a way.
I would say from a partnership perspective, it was pretty much more from the advertising side of things that so I just want to say like external users that whether it's transaction or in ad delivery or impression, that probably was the most impacted area from an external party perspective, more than any financial service app, because at that scale it's not really, it's very insignificant from an impact perspective.
Carl, you wanted
Can I ask a question?
Tyler.
Yes, anyone can ask questions.
Okay, so I was just wondering, I know that a couple of groups that we do chatting in daily, hourly basis on WhatsApp, we immediately said we gotta have a backup. We can't depend on WhatsApp, and created, Telegram and other things for a backup and things like that. So I was just wondering from that perspective, what the impact would be in terms of like having backup or migrating into other, solutions and things like that. Or also people now appreciating how much that we were depending on that because Facebook was getting beaten up for the last few days. So I was just wondering from that perspective what the outcome would be or the review would be.
Yeah. And then Carl makes a good point about the single sign-on, which they call Facebook Connect, to authenticate. Some people have tied, they connect to Tinder or SoundCloud or other.
Oh, their authentication servers were down. Yeah. Good frack.
The SSO was down as well, and this highlights like when you've got this single gatekeeper
That's huge.
of multiple accounts. Pinterest, for instance, noticed a massive drop in users because so many of their people that the same category of people who use the likes of Pinterest are also heavy Facebook users, and they log in with Facebook. They were all down. So this went far, far, far beyond Facebook and WhatsApp and Instagram and Oculus. They're the gatekeepers for a lot of third-party apps as well, who their users couldn't sign in. And if you've signed in with Facebook, you can't log in with your email address. You have to log in with Facebook or make a new account. You were locked out completely.
Competent congressmen could make a field day with this. I doubt they're going to go with anything without prepared remarks for tomorrow with stuff. So I mean, like, there's just the amount of chaos around this is amazing.
So
by the way, on this, on this particular point,
hold on,
Tyler,
hold on.
If I can chip in,
real quick.
Like,
1 second, Adriana.
Like,
so
okay. One thing that
1
Johan
second,
was
Adriana. So Facebook has made an official announcement now from the engineering team from Satosh Janardhan, who says, to all the people and businesses around the world who depend on us, we're sorry for the inconvenience caused by today's outage across the platforms. We've been working as hard as we can to restore access, and our systems are now back up and running. The underlying cause of this outage also impacted many of the internal tools and systems we use in our day-to-day operations, complicating our attempts to quickly diagnose and resolve the problem. And perhaps what he's might be referring to, some people were saying on Twitter that even people couldn't get into the build. Even the people who needed to fix the problem had trouble physically getting into the physical building. Our engineering team have learned that configuration changes on the backbone routers that coordinate network traffic between our data centers caused issues that interrupted this communication. This disruption to network traffic had a cascading effect on the way our data centers communicate, bringing our services to a halt. Our services are now back online, and we're actively working to fully return them to regular operations. We want to make clear at this time we believe that the root cause of this outage was a faulty configuration change. We also have no evidence that user data was compromised as a result of this downtime. People and businesses around the world rely on us every day to stay connected. We understand the impact outages like these have on people's lives and our responsibility to keep people informed about the disruption to our service. We apologize to all those affected, and we're working to understand more about what happened today so we can continue to make our infrastructure more resilient. End of article. Go ahead, Adriana.
No, I'm just trying to remind, like what Johan was mentioning before. Early days on internet, when you're giving an ID for your work, for your number, part of the contract you need to sign is the fact that you would be responsible to maintain all the tables, and that's why the entire infrastructure of the internet can survive, because sometimes, most of the times, like other third parties will be doing that for you, so you could rely on a backup and have it like much more fully protected. But like the fact that Facebook choose to control everything is also like completely wrong, on the point that internet doesn't work like that, or that was not planned to work like that, with like having full control of things. So I hope they change their mind into that, and go back to thinking that like other entities can control those routing tables, and that doesn't happen. The other point is, like, I don't know if you have the numbers, and like how many people migrate from Twitter or to Signal or to the other applications in order to go outside of like WhatsApp, and the loss of people they're gonna have like in the later days.
Yes, Twitter it's been revealed or published that Twitter had a record traffic moment yesterday.
And essentially all the competitors to Facebook learned overnight, going, hey, by the way, it turns out that people, something ever goes wrong, we could get a huge
Signal, the
spike.
messaging app, had a great day. Their downloads friggin'
Oh,
spiked. It was
Signal's
brilliant
doing
for them.
great these days.
Yeah,
I
no,
was going to
it's awesome.
mention that Signal really worked well, and a lot of my friends, downloaded it just so that we could communicate.
For people in the audience that want to find out the platform, signal.org, it's wonderful. It's used by all sorts of security people, state-based actors, and everyone in between. It's a lot of fun. You can send gifts to
Just
each
use
other. That's the
Signal.
important thing.
Yeah,
Just use
Signal is so
Signal.
much fun. I like it.
So
How much is it a permanent migration, or how much is just a blip? That would
I
be
mean, I've been using it
interesting
for a
to
year
know.
with stuff, so I can recommend it heavily. It's my primary messaging thing, but it's more the merrier.
Yeah,
I've
I've
been
used
No,
using
it
it
what I
since
for
mean
last.
is,
I've
good.
used it since last May too. It's working out well.
So we covered the first big story of the day, which was the Facebook outage. The second biggest story of the day, based on traffic, is a review of the new Microsoft Windows 11 with improved modern UI and sounds, but many promised features like Android apps are missing, and new taskbar is a step back, according to The Verge. The third biggest article is also from The Verge. They're having a good day. That Android 12 review, the new version of Android for all the Android devices, and they say the big design improvements led by what's called Material U, where it's a much more personalizable. Personizable. What's the word I'm looking for there? Personalizable. Is that a word? Customizable. But the new widgets will need dev support to shine. Pixel phones get the update in a few weeks. There are just a few noteworthy features in this design-focused update. So the most exciting thing about the Android update, is with the Material U. The fourth biggest article is from the New York Times by Kevin Roose. It says, as Wall Street Journal's Facebook files suggest, Facebook seems to be in a slow, steady decline, evidenced by frenetic pivots, executive paranoia, and talent attrition. The trove of leaked documents published by the Wall Street Journal hints at a company whose best days are behind it. And when you go to this New York Times article, which I will tweet out now, it's quite notable in that I'll tweet it right now, and you'll notice when you open the article, and even if you just look at the tweet that I just twatted on Twitter at TNATW, the whole front landing page of it is the Facebook logo that looks like it's shattered, like somebody that it was made of glass and it's now been broken. And the first headline says, Facebook is weaker than we knew. A trove of leaked documents published by the Wall Street Journal hints at a company whose best days are behind it, which, as we discussed this point when we met 12 hours ago, is the New York Times and Kevin, who wrote the article, isn't really being. This is a bit sensationalistic. It's a bit activist-ish. It's not exactly the conventional journalism that the New York Times built its legacy on. It's a bit, activism journalism. They're trying to hurt Facebook, and the claims they make seem very high schoolish, almost in slightly libelous, like, Susie, did you hear Susie sleeping with the whole football team type of, like, a character assassination ish. So it's quite remarkable. I mean, to me, the remarkable thing about this article is not what they're claiming, but the fact that they're claiming it, this isn't news. There's no definitive. It's more of an opinion piece, but this is not listed in the opinion piece section, which it clearly should be, because those are opinions saying Facebook is weaker than we knew, and that there's hints that the company's best days are behind it. That's an opinion. If you look at their stock chart, they're fucking dominating. They're the leader in the metaverse, which is likely to be the next big platform for the next fucking decade. So what happens when they do take over the metaverse, and the metaverse is the next platform for the next 10 years? Then people are going to look back at this article and be like, yeah, the New York Times, they used to be around. They used to be relevant. And then they started, they got on this activism agenda journalism, and it bit them in the ass. And I'll give you an even better example. We have an actual concrete example from 1 year ago, looking back today. And it was from the CEO, Brian Armstrong of Coinbase, who took to Twitter yesterday, or a few days ago, over the weekend. Let me pull it up, this Twitter thread, because, oh boy, does he make an incredibly bulletproof case that the New York Times is now a shit-talking rag. I mean, I don't know how you decide for yourself. Here we go. Let me pull this up. Brian Armstrong, and he did this again over the weekend, so I just got to scroll back to his last big tweet thread, which is right here. And here we go. So he says, well, first, some background context. A year ago, he wrote a blog post saying, okay, we've got a whole new thing here in Coinbase because we're going to IPO soon. There's a whole lot. Everyone in America is going on and on and on about the Black Lives Matter. And what was the gentleman's name in Minnesota, who the whole case was about? The man who died.
George Floyd.
Yes, George Floyd. Thank you.
George Floyd.
Yes, thank you. So George Floyd kicked off a massive debate in America, and about defunding the police and Black Lives Matter and the protests and everything. And temperatures were high, and that's understandable. However, it that and other things inspired Coinbase's CEO to say, okay, look, we have our own issue and mission here at Coinbase, which is to, enable cryptocurrency to the world, which we think is an incredibly noble mission. That's our singular mission. We need to stay focused. If you want to focus on other missions, please go do that at another company. So if you don't want this to be your main mission, it's better that you say goodbye. Here's a very generous severance package. It's been lovely. And if you want to stay focused on this mission, great. You're welcome to stay. So in doing that blog post, the New York Times started writing articles, hit pieces, basically, and it did a piece interviewing some of the Black employees who decided to take the severance package, and interviewed them to say, do you think Coinbase is racist? Is this a racist policy? Are they intentionally trying to? And they projected, just like they're projecting about Facebook today, that article I just read about, is Facebook the best days behind it? They said the same about Coinbase. Is Coinbase now going to have a severe problem with hiring diverse talent? Are they going to have a diversity problem? And how are they going to survive this? And, starting to preemptively dance on their grave. Coinbase has gone on to be incredibly successful in the past year. That was written a year ago. So Brian, knowing that the New York Times wrote that hit piece a year ago, has been carefully watching the metrics, the data, what's going on for the past year. And so now he decides to give he doesn't need to, but he felt the need to go onto Twitter and give a 1-year update and show the receipts of what's happened in the past year since that hit piece. So watch what he says here on his Twitter thread. He says, it's been about a year since my mission-focused blog post. It wasn't easy to go through at the time, but looking back, it turned out to be one of the most positive changes I've made at Coinbase, and I'd recommend it to others. We have a much more aligned company now where we can focus on getting work done toward our mission, and it has allowed us to hire some of the best talent from organizations where employees are fed up with politics, infighting, and distractions. One of the biggest concerns around our stance was that it would impact our diversity numbers. Since my post, we've grown our head count about 110%, while our diversity numbers have remained the same or even improved in some metrics. Several people told me this would never happen when I circulated the original draft internally. It turns out that there are people from every background who want to work at a mission-focused company. What was amazing was the contrast between the news following the post and the reaction from employees and people who spoke to me in private. While the media reports were mostly negative, and it even spawned some retaliatory and intellectually dishonest hit pieces, the reaction both from employees and people I spoke to in private was overwhelmingly positive. In fact, I would say this was probably the most positive reaction I've gotten to any change I've made in the history of the company, which is saying something. How could something be so negative in the press, but turn out to be so incredibly positive with every stakeholder? The only sense I can make of it is that there's a huge mismatch between people's stated and revealed preferences right now, and we're operating in an environment of virtue signaling and fear of speaking up. The biggest lesson I took away from the whole ordeal is that if you believe in something is the right path, it's worth speaking up about it, even if it's controversial. You will get lots of attacks online, and not everyone will agree, but ultimately people will want clarity and authenticity from leaders, not platitudes. It will come back to you tenfold. For leaders out there, think about any area where you aren't being 100% authentic and instead are trying to keep the peace or say what you think people want to hear. It's incredibly difficult to do, but if you stand up and say what you really think, it may turn out better than you thought. Saying this advice for myself as much as anyone else, there will be many more challenges ahead. So my point is that the New York Times was wrong about Coinbase. And he's essentially showing it. This is his example of showing the receipts that they were wrong, that they were tap dancing on his grave preemptively, and they were wrong. And now they're tap dancing on Facebook's grave, and they will likely be wrong about that as well. So, New York Times, why are you doing this? Why are you jeopardizing and tarnishing hundreds of decades of hard-earned reputation as the most reputable news source on the planet, and now you're in the likes of fucking BuzzFeed with this bullshit? Stop doing this. Or be clear that you're doing these as in opinion pieces, but you didn't in these cases. These were traditional New York Times tech journalism pieces, and it's tarnishing your reputation, and it's sad to see, honestly. The New York Times is an incredibly valuable institution of journalism, and there's not many of them left. And so it's sad when any of them do this. So anyway, end of rant.
Might it be so that these are the last shiverings of a dying mainstream media? These are the last posts that actually is falling right.
I think it's. I don't want to say it's uniquely American. It's happening in other cities too. Nikkei Japan's still doing fantastic traditional journalism, just calling it, reporting the facts as they see them. I would say DW in Germany does it as well, and there's others. But in America, the climate has it's become sensationalized and entertained. I from my perspective, it was Fox News who really popularized this new sort of entertainment, fear-mongering type news style that is hard to compete with. and they were winning, and their competitors saw that Fox News was pulling ahead, and I think they realized if they needed to stay at the top of at the front of the race, they need to take a similar approach, and it's quite regrettable, anyway.
But Tyler, can I add a
Sure.
comment?
Yeah.
In your example with Coinbase, I think there's another dynamic, and that's Binance was excluded in between European market, and so Binance users went to Coinbase. So we shouldn't also underestimate effect of this switch, right? I mean, I'm not saying about New York Times, but in this case, there's another factor here that played a big role in growth of Coinbase globally.
Oh, you're saying that Coinbase benefited from the
Yeah,
controversy?
yes.
Yes, they did.
Yeah,
And by
well,
the way,
yeah.
they benefited so much from the controversy, ironically, that I believe that's what inspired Basecamp to essentially announce, oh, we're going to do the same too. We're going to tell everyone they can't have political discussions at work too. It's like, well, nobody asked you. Why are you volunteering this information a week after Coinbase? Coinbase, it was a leaked email, right? Coinbase sent out an email to the team. Some of the team members who didn't like it leaked it to the press. The press announced it. Coinbase didn't announce they were going to do this. They didn't do a PR piece and say, hey, everybody, we want the world to know we're making this change at Coinbase. No, they let their employees know. The employees let the press know. The press were kind of shocked and tried to use it, weaponize it against them and say, oh, look what Coinbase is doing. Can you believe what Coinbase is doing? And it turned out to help Coinbase and bite the New York Times in the ass, as I just made clear. Now, because Coinbase did benefit from this controversy, as you're pointing out, that led Basecamp to announce directly to everybody, hey, everybody, we're going to do the same too. Because we saw how much millions of dollars of free press that Coinbase got from it. Hey, look, we're going to do it too. Us too, everybody. Can we get a little attention over here? Can we get some of that juicy free marketing eyeballs on us, please?
Yes, that's
Well,
good.
yeah, but that's just, you're doing that as a PR attempt. You're announcing it. You didn't say it to your team members, and then your team members who are upset about it told it to the press, and then the press talked about it. You announced it yourself, which made it perfectly clear your real motives for doing this. So, anyway, it's a crazy game, this whole PR marketing stuff. So the next one is from Vice, and it says that in a filing, an initiative called Syniverse, which routes text messages for AT&T and Verizon and others, says hackers had accessed its databases and logins for 5 years.
Years.
Yes.
Two-factor authentication for everyone in.
Syniverse handles billions of text messages a year, and hackers had unauthorized access to its systems for years.
It's not the two-factor wouldn't help you if you get that the service provider gets
Hacked.
slammed into the floor and open up.
Correct.
We
Two-factor
know
for the
that.
end user doesn't matter at all.
Right. So let's unpack this for the non-geeks here. Basically, what Johan and Chris are so excited about is the fact that most, like for example, Clubhouse. But this is not a negative. This is not a negative against Clubhouse. It's one of the ways we secure our online profiles, like our Clubhouse profiles, is Clubhouse will say, okay, is this really you? Let's find out. We're going to send you a text message with the 6-digit code. Please enter it on our website. Okay, great. You've authenticated that you are who you say you are. Now you can come into the site. Thousands of sites, hundreds of thousands of websites.
Industry standard practice.
Industry standard practice. Thank you. So the problem is, what happens when the SMS providers in the background get hacked? And then they're able to circumvent your two-factor authentication, SMS two-factor authentication.
They don't even need to get hacked. They just need to pay $14.95 for
that.
the service.
What Chris is saying is, in fact, there's been examples of hackers paying somebody who works at the company, hey, would you mind sending me all the SMSs that come to this phone number?
No, Tyler, you are I'm sorry. Just to characterize this, it's not you pay a hacker. The telecoms are selling
No, that's
this
what I'm
data.
saying. I'm saying a hacker paid the telecom.
No,
That's
no,
what I'm
no, no,
saying.
no, 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 no. The telecoms have marketing divisions that sell this off to private, basically investigators. They make money on this. The telecoms make money on this.
So this new headline is quite disturbing. A company that is
But we're
critical
talking about
part of the global
SMS
telecommunications.
like
Huh?
forwarding though, right? Are we talking about SMS forwarding or?
This is the entire SMS infrastructure at this point.
A company that is critical part of the global telecommunications infrastructure used by AT&T, T-Mobile, Verizon, and several others around the world such as Vodafone, China Mobile, quietly disclosed that hackers were inside its system for years, impacting more than 200 of its clients, meaning 200 different telecommunications companies, and potentially millions of cell phone users worldwide. The company called Syniverse revealed in a filing with the U.S. SEC that an unknown individual or organization gained unauthorized access to databases within its network on several occasions, and that login information allowing access to or from its electronic data transfer environment was compromised for approximately 235 telecommunication companies. A former Syniverse employee who worked on the EDT system told Motherboard that those systems have information on all types of call records. Syniverse repeatedly declined to answer specific questions from Motherboard about the scale of the breach and what specific data was affected. But according to the person who works at a telephone carrier, whoever hacked Syniverse could have had access to metadata such as length and cost, caller and receiver numbers, the location of the parties in the call, as well as the content of SMS text messages.
That's not millions, that's billions. The
It's,
key part about that is you can get the system administrators with those accounts.
yes, Syniverse is a common exchange hub for carriers around the world, passing billing info back and forth to each other's. The source, who asked to remain anonymous as they were not authorized to talk to the press, told Motherboard. So it inevitably carries sensitive info like call records, data usage records, text messages, etc. The thing is, I don't know exactly what was being exchanged in that environment. One would have to imagine, though, it easily could be customer records and personal identifying information, given that Syniverse exchanges call records and other billing details between carriers. So not only was your two-factor authentication SMS messages being revealed, all your messages, and very likely your phone number was is obviously part of it, but also identifiable information of your phone numbers part of it. So it's
Tyler,
yes.
just expanding on this with things. So reading through Stone disclosures is very useful for this with things. So imagine essentially you have a list of, let's say, 1,000 of the world's largest corporations. You have a list of essentially all of their heads of security and CTOs, along with essentially their private contact numbers for their phone numbers. You acquired this via public channels, and essentially that's something that essentially is not very hard to acquire. Then what you do is you combine it with this database, and now essentially you have basically the personal transactions for essentially each one of those CTOs that are using for their daily correspondence and their daily things for the internal security architecture. 5 years. So when you've got that, it's not necessarily that, okay, we lost essentially some telecoms or some people have lost their data. All the system administrators are compromised. That's the part that's really significant about this, because that sort of infrastructure and requiring them to use this, that's the thing that basically scales. So it means the scale of this isn't in the millions, it's in the billions of people affected by this, which is astounding.
The article says this, and what Chris is alluding to is, for the slow kids in the class, is even the people who secure networks, they were vulnerable. And so now if Carl's a clever hacker and he was the one behind this Syniverse hack, he now has compromised all the sysadmins of all the other systems. This is kind of like the mother of all hacks in a way. So it says the world's largest companies and nearly all mobile carriers rely on Syniverse's global network to seamlessly bridge mobile ecosystems and securely transmit data, enabling billions of transactions, conversations, and connections. Syniverse has access to the communication of hundreds of millions, if not billions, of people around the world. A 5-year breach of one of Syniverse's main systems is a global privacy disaster, says Karsten Knoll, a security researcher who has studied global cell phone networks for a decade, told Motherboard in an email. Syniverse systems have direct access to phone call records and text messaging, and indirect access to a large range of internet accounts protected with SMS two-factor authentication. Hacking Syniverse will ease access to Google, Microsoft, Facebook, Twitter, Amazon, and all other accounts all at once. Yes. And even the admins for those accounts. So it's unprecedented kind of revelation with regard to vulnerability.
So to apply this to our daily lives, I think it's important for the non-tech people to remember that you don't want to use SMS two-factor authentication. You want to use, at a minimum, you want to use something like Google Authenticator, or better yet,
A hardware
a
key.
hardware device like YubiKey.
YubiKey from Sweden.
Agree.
You will be
Do
seeing a
not
lot
use
more
SMS.
YubiKey style stuff in the future because essentially this is
this article that we just read is the will begin the Cambrian explosion that will be hardware keys. Basically, everyone, you're going to be hearing a whole lot about hardware keys for your devices, which is like it's a physical key. And the latest, now that the EU is pushing the USB-C as the standard, and YubiKey does have a USB-C key.
Oh yeah.
So you're going
to NFC and Lightning if you have to, right?
Yes.
So it fits all devices.
Yeah, but you're going to see
just to highlight this. I've worked with CTOs and I've been sat with them, and they have gone to authenticate via SMS, and they've had the notifications on their phone screen where their messages show a preview, and at that point, then you have your secure key that you have been sent showing up publicly on your phone, and you could be sat in cafes, you could be sat in public like public spaces or whatever. If you've got your private key showing up on your phone screen as a message preview, then you may as well not be using two-factor authentication. Just use an authenticator as opposed to SMS.
Which is why Google makes it, because they understand that, and that's why Google tries to get you to use Authenticator instead of SMS two-factor authentication.
There's a mechanical issue with the two-factor authentication, though, right? Because it makes you a prime phishing target. Because just to even get to the two-factor, you have to enter some kind of password. You have to be a sleuth on paying attention to the URL, making sure you're at the right site. You know, you have to send text to say, "Hey, did you send me this document?" Like, you know, and so now they've moved to what Microsoft Office is now. If you have Authenticator, you don't even have to enter any credentials. It's just going to log you in based on IP or something. I don't know.
Well, so the two-factor essentially is very important essentially for what it does with things. There's multiple layers to any security stack. Essentially, you never have like a silver bullet to do anything. The main thing essentially that having a physical hardware key does is it says the person that's on the other end of this is who they say they are. And I can verify if they are who they say they are. Now, whether or not their machine's been compromised, whether or not they're acting as a bad faith actor, whether other things, those are other layers that other parts of the security have to take into account. But just having that one component of they are who they say they are, that is a really, really important foundation when you basically are trying to build a security architecture. And that's one of the things that basically, if you don't even have that, what it means is, use your imagination on this. So we talked about essentially with the earlier part with Facebook basically disappearing from the internet for a little bit. One of the things that essentially that state-based actors are known to do is doing something called a black hole, or what they'll do is they'll hijack significant parts of the routing tables and route like all the traffic in the world through a set of compromised servers for a time period so they can basically alter the traffic in midstream. And this is something that's basically done on a semi-regular basis. Now, here's what's really important about that. If you do that essentially in combination, if you basically control essentially the streams of these things, what it allows you to do is basically hijack those authentication streams in real time. So whether or not essentially someone's going to be logging on or something, it's not that it's irrelevant. It's the fact that essentially you can basically authenticate yourself. And if you can authenticate yourself as an external actor to have full admin access to the account to make modifications and such, that means that essentially you have essentially God mode access on these systems. And if you basically are doing this at scale, not as like one attack, two attack, three attack, four, but you're doing the scale of thousands or tens of thousands of highly vulnerable security accounts at a time, that sort of automated mass social phishing is astounding on the amount of control you can have over computer systems.
Okay, next one. Let me bring. There's two people. Crypto. Well, there was two. There's one. NFT character raising their hands here. Oh, there he's back. Okay, so we have two NFT folks who want to jump on stage. I just invited them because the next article is about. The information says they have sources that Andreessen Horowitz is leading a $150 million round for the developer of Axie Infinity, the NFT game, virtual real estate play, at a valuation near $3 billion, which makes sense because I think they just announced they've had is it $2 billion worth of transactions in Axie Infinity? I think we read that headline about a week ago. Yeah, they seem to have a really nice position with the growth of with things at the moment. So Jay Lee Walls and Z Creative Media, any comments on Axie Infinity raising $150 million from Andreessen Horowitz at a $3 billion valuation?
Hi. Thanks for having me on stage. Hi, Jay Lee. Thanks.
Hi, Jeff.
Thanks for this room, y'all. This is
Hey, Jay
incredible.
Lee and Z Creative, how are you?
Hi.
Hi,
Good.
it's MA. What's going on? Good to
Good to
see
see
you.
you.
Good to see you both as well. Thank
I
you.
don't have any comments about that, but I can hear a little bit better on the stage. But I really love this idea that Facebook is actually this company that just couldn't get it right today because of some configuration error, which is very vague. But I think what y'all are talking about with the security hacks and how you can route all the world's data through these very vulnerable systems. I don't know. I mean, connect the dots, right? I mean, maybe there's something interesting. Not to say like there's a conspiracy or anything, but the fact that all this data exactly, X-Files, yes,
I love that.
I think something is going on here where we actually have the possibility of hacking all the world's data into the hands of the few, and you have to turn off the systems for everybody else to access in order to collect all that data into one central authority, right? So it happens every once in a while. It happened during South by like 4 years ago. And now that there's more data, longer. So this is just my conspiracy theory.
Okay. Okay, so the next one up is from Reuters that there's a filing that GitLab is looking to raise $624 million in its US IPO, targeting a valuation of $9 billion. GitLab was valued at $6 billion in January. So that's a nice 50% increase in 9-10 months. And GitLab is a coding platform and backed by Coastal Ventures and Iconic Capital and others. And there it goes. The next one's from The Verge, and the headline is How Siri, Apple Siri, launched a decade ago today, fell behind Google Assistant, Alexa, and others, likely due to management dysfunction, Apple's walled garden, and more. And what they're talking about is, with the Apple walled garden, is Siri essentially only works on Apple hardware. They don't make it accessible to non-Apple hardware. And Google Assistant works on all kinds of hardware. I have a JBL speaker. I have a TCL TV, all with Google Assistant, all built in, and many other devices as well. And Google understood that. And that's a big part of it. So, I think that more than anything is why Siri is really losing this race, which this is itself a platform of the future, just like we had the PC era and then the smartphone era, and now we're going into the metaverse era. Some would argue that the voice assistant is also a new other era, because it's the big players are Apple, Siri, Alexa from Amazon, and Google Assistant. And who's going to win this whole smart device era where you're going to control them in a large part via voices? And Amazon's flooding the zone with all kinds of hardware and trying to partner with other hardware manufacturers and car manufacturers, and Apple's trying to partner with the car manufacturers. Google's killing it. Google comes out with the Android Auto operating system for car manufacturers. That's how you win, is you make it super, 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 super simple and super easy and cheap to add Google Assistant to your devices to make them smart. So if you are a speaker manufacturer or a TV manufacturer and you're trying to decide, should we put in Google Assistant or Alexa or Apple Siri, you're going to put in whichever one is the cheapest and easiest and most powerful. And boy, has Google really understood that and as a way to gain market share, to build their ecosystem. And Apple just, it did, I don't, man, it's a tough one because they don't even have, I mean, they have the Apple TV little side product, but they don't have an actual Apple TV monitor that they sell in the marketplace to gain more traction. Although they would argue their clever move was the AirPods, which do work, are designed to work with Siri. And so anyway, and the
No, but
watch.
that's an interesting point,
Yeah.
Tyler.
Yeah.
And it's curious about the different business models, right? Because you have Google, which is in the business of selling advertising, collecting user data.
Yeah.
But then I think Apple's more on the privacy end of so they claim they want to protect the privacy of their users, right?
Yes, that's the legacy perspective. That changed fundamentally after the Pegasus revelation. That turns out Apple devices, they're not singing that privacy song anymore. And this is evidenced by the fact that at their last the iPhone 13 launch event, where they announced a lot of their new upcoming products, they didn't mention privacy at all for the first time in a decade.
There's
And
a
Oh,
reason I'm
wow.
on a burner phone, right, Tyler?
it's because they can't. They no longer can, because it's been revealed that was pure marketing hype. That in fact, it's a nice image that they've painted, and that image was held up until the Pegasus USO group Pegasus vulnerability and exploits came out, and even more since then. 4 more 0-day exploits have been revealed. So Apple can no longer claim privacy and security, and it's partly because there's another very important reason as well, which is it's now well understood and known and reported Apple is diligently at work on building an ad network to compete with Google on their ad network and Facebook's ad network, which is sort of in decline. And Apple's doing this ever since 14.8, really 14.5 is when they announced, hey, do you really want Facebook tracking all your data? Press here to turn that off. And a whole lot of people turned it off. And Apple's minimizing the data that's shared from their devices to the ad networks like Facebook. And Facebook put a full page ad in the papers saying, hey, Apple's trying to stop your mom and pop shop from advertising online, and they're
At
hurting
the same
you.
time,
Yeah.
At the same time, the most recent thing is they're basically putting AI software on your phone that was going to basically be scanning for illicit content in your government district of choice and basically reporting that to law enforcement directly. This is the difference between paying a few $1,000s for devices that you own and physically control versus this is basically renting hardware from Apple that basically is going to be basically deciding whether or not you're basically a good citizen. This is a sort of basically infrastructure that was deliberately promised, saying you will never go there. Well, they went there, and now this is basically part of the core platform moving forward. So this is the sort of architecture that essentially is the idea of essentially if you don't pay for it, you're in the product. If you can pay for privacy, etc., that is dead now. So this is going to be an interesting era in computing coming forward.
Next up, The Verge. YouTube says YouTube Music users in Canada can access background streaming for free starting November 3rd. The first time non-premium users can access the feature. YouTube Music is lifting one of its most annoying limitations. So you can play a video, music on the device, turn the screen off, put it in your pocket, listen to your earphones, and now watch out Spotify, because now
Thank God.
YouTube Music, this is, I think, from YouTube's music perspective, is a clever strategy here, which is really showing users, hey, you can use YouTube as a music streaming platform. Did you know that? You can build
This is
playlists.
amazing. They basically put it back to a
That's
functionality they had
huge
15 years
against
ago.
Spotify. That's
This
huge
is
because
really a big deal.
the main reason why I also use Spotify is, not only just a playlist, but also the fact that it uses so much less battery, and the fact that you can still use your phone or your computer and just, do your work and have that still going on in the background. So that is huge because, on some aspects, there's a lot of cool things that YouTube has and other playlists and things that you can do that Spotify doesn't. And this is going to be a big deal now against Spotify.
Tyler,
Yep.
I'm quite curious. No one's ever mentioned Mixcloud or SoundCloud.
because this is also two platforms where, like, as a yoga teacher, this is where I also pull music from.
Yeah.
Because Spotify makes it a difficult challenge, and Tyler, you're from LA, so you know what I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. When they started to come after yoga teachers in yoga studios,
sure.
They were playing music inside their classes, and then they were like, oh my God, you got to pay money. And I'm thinking to myself, whoa, 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 whoa. So what did we do? We went to YouTube, or we went to Mixcloud or SoundCloud. Yeah. And SoundCloud and Mixcloud, you can use them on their apps and still play them, as the young woman was saying, that you can still play them. Yeah. But there have been times where we find bhajans or kirtans or certain instrumental music that's old on YouTube, but then we'd want to play it, and then all of a sudden we shut the phone off and we're like, oh my God, it's off. And that was such a bone of contention for so many yoga teachers as well, especially if they're using YouTube because it's free. Yeah. You know, this will be interesting now to see what happens, because it's giving the ability for a whole bunch of other demographics to be able to use YouTube in context of using music, whether it be for a fitness class, a yoga session, or meditation session. Very interesting right now.
Yeah. Okay. Well, speaking of streaming services, the next article headline says, in a blow to online streaming services, over 50,000 backstage movie and TV workers vote to authorize a strike after the union's demands were not met. So there's a huge strike in Hollywood. And let's have a looky here. It says, Hollywood crews vote yes on strike authorization, raising the stakes for streaming giants. Uh-oh. Ratcheting up the stakes in an already tense labor battle, members of the International Alliance of Theatrical Stage Employees have voted to authorize union president to call a strike. The group announced Monday the decision could lead to the most significant industry walkout since World War II. Should negotiations with the powerful trade group remain deadlocked. 53,000 plus behind-the-scenes workers in entertainment participated in the vote, and more than 98% of those voters supported the strike authorization. The union announced the members have spoken loud and clear. They said in a press release, the vote is about the quality of life as well as the health and safety of those who work in the film and television industry. The vote will be used as a bargaining chip in ongoing talks with the motion picture and TV producers, which represent Disney, Apple, AT&T, and other giants in entertainment and tech. It comes as the rise of streaming, this is the key point here, has ramped up the tech industry's influence in Hollywood, ensuring that Amazon and Netflix have a seat at the bargaining table alongside major studios such as Sony and Paramount. Here's the quote. Every single local worker who voted far exceeded the 75% threshold for a strike authorization, says the president of the Cinematographers Guild, said in a message, we are now scheduled to return to the table tomorrow, October 5th, to hear from the employers. The union consists of camera technicians, editors, makeup artists, location managers, and a host of other workers in entertainment. In negotiation for a new contract, also known as a basic agreement, the union representatives have pressed for, here's what they're asking for: meals and breaks during the day, rest periods between shifts and on weekends, a living wage for the lowest paid people, and some appropriate adjustments to new media streaming based on its maturity. And let me assure you, that's the real bulk of it. Some appropriate adjustments to streaming based on the maturity of the companies. And there's two more paragraphs, and then I'll really explain what's going on here. But talks have stalled for weeks on a number of issues, from raising the wage floor to funding union members' pensions through a greater cut of streaming profits. There it is, right there. While the union has yet to declare a strike, the producers group, kind of the power that they're striking against, warned last month that a walkout would, quote unquote, have a devastating impact on the industry and inevitably will result in thousands of union members losing their income, failing to qualify for health insurance benefits, jeopardizing funding for the pension plan, and disrupting production. End of article.
That's what a strike does.
Yeah, exactly right. That's what an amazing prediction you have there. So, but maybe they're implying that we're going to go ahead and let you strike, and let's see who can last longer. It's like it's
Hey,
a
by the way, Netflix has a global footprint and basically has productions in every basically
right,
jurisdiction around the
right.
world. So, okay, well, this market's not producing. That's fine. We can just import content from someone else.
And
We
by the
already
way,
negotiate global.
oh, and by the way, did we not see headlines yesterday? This is fantastic. Netflix's hot new title out of Korea. Someone tell me the name. It's like the biggest
Squid Game.
Squid Game. Thank you.
Squid Game, yeah.
So Squid Game, coincidentally, is made out of South Korea, and this was all the rage in the news yesterday. That here it is, headline 17 hours ago from Variety, Hollywood's biggest publication. The headline says Squid Game success earns Netflix. That their whole global approach to content production is working. Now, why would they do that? What is the source of this article? Why is there an article coming out of Variety saying that Netflix's global production approach is working
Shots fired.
24 hours before actually while simultaneously the workers who work on these films in America, all of them, when you go to make a film, you've ever watched a film to its end and there's the end credits and there's all those people? Well, basically, all those people are striking, right? And they were voting yesterday about striking. And while they were voting about striking, Variety comes out with a headline saying Netflix whole new global distribution process of making films is actually working. Do you understand why that article came out yesterday at that very opportunistic moment while those workers were voting as to whether or not they're going to strike?
Negotiation leverage.
Both sides were playing clever tricks simultaneously. And streaming is the new game. The streaming, as I've said here many times, the streaming platforms are the new power players because they're the ones collecting the payments from the consumers directly. You subscribe to Netflix, you pay them money, they get your money, they produce they then hire all of those people to make those studios to make the content. However, the streaming platforms, it used to be there have been writers' strikes in Hollywood in the past and whatnot, but it used to be
they were seen as pariahs for a while.
Right. Well, the movie studios used to be the power players, and then the movie studios were always dependent on the next movie because the game used to be you would make a movie, you'd play it in the theater, and then after it was out of the theater, the bulk of the money was the bulk of the money while it was airing in the theaters for 2, 3, 4 months. And then after
DVDs, but
and then DVDs came out, and there was an additional new revenue stream, which was the aftermarket. After it's played in the theaters, you have this longer tail DVD sales. Okay, that was nice too. However, Netflix comes along, and the other streaming platforms, and they keep all the content in their Netflix platform in perpetuity, and they've got a huge library of content, so they are not as dependent on the up to the minute release, the hot new in the theater release, like the movie studios
they can take their own sweet time.
Right. The movie studios would from time to time would have to get in little negotiations with the workers, the busy bees who are actually building the sets and doing the makeup and the costumes and all that stuff. And if they said, you know what, we're striking because we want more, and we when they would strike, they had a lot of power because that would shut down the movie production for the film that's supposed to go in the theater in 6 months from now. And now that movie's not going to be there, and so your revenue is going to dry up. And as a movie studio, you're screwed. You got to negotiate with the busy bees working on the movie sets. Now Netflix is in a slightly different position because now Netflix is the power player. And they
Tyler,
don't
contrast with how they treat people with things, the reputation they have. You go to a movie studio, they will basically just do executive edits. You'll be in development hell for years. You walk into a Netflix, they have the beautiful lobby there with the big screens going floor to ceiling, and they basically usher you up the elevator. They'll give you a decision in 48 hours. They're going to greenlight your thing. They might have 2 changes to your script, and if you're basically okay with that, then you're good. You get greenlit. It's like, here's the bank account. Here's essentially the little FTP server you upload it to at the end. They're like, hey, let us know essentially when you're done, essentially in 8-10 months with stuff, and we'll tell you when we're good to go. Like, that is the level of quickness they have. the global distribution going outside markets, they basically put entire marketing budgets with everything. The fact is that when they do their internal staff, just to give a reference for people in the room, when essentially when they're trying to poach everyone, they went and raised $10 billion from Wall Street, and they basically came to Hollywood and they said, okay, here's how this is going to work. If you've ever had a job working anywhere ever before, we're going to basically take any job you've ever had, look it up on essentially what industry comparables for that is, and we're going to double it. Because essentially you're going to pay the highest amount you will ever basically be paid in your life, and we are going to expect you to work your ass off. And if you even slip it behind a little bit, you're fired instantly, but that's okay, because you will basically be well compensated for it. So they have that reputation that they pay for every single thing that they do. Now, this is different from essentially a reputation that, say, a group like Warner Brothers does, where penny pitching, going, oh, can you cut this, can you cut this, can you cut that? So can you imagine as a creative basically walking in and basically getting all the money you've ever had for that project, the greenlit, and getting to do your dream project, those weird little things that never got greenlit all before, and then all of a sudden these guys say, hey, by the way, there's a little bit of a union dispute. That's a thing going on here. But you know what? We'll treat you well with a thing. Oh, you want to work with the studios? Yeah, you can do that. They've got their own system. We'll work with them, I guess, with stuff. But I can tell you right now, the people that basically are in the ecosystem that Netflix has, they've already got their loyal adherents because they've basically been treating people well over a very long period of time. So it's going to show up in these negotiations because there's other players in town.
So Squid
Tyler,
Game,
did you know that
yes,
that Squid Game, because actually Netflix is being sued by South Korea because of the popularity of Squid Game?
yes, because it's so popular that it's taking up internet traffic, and so the internet service providers are like, "Hey, this movie is so outrageously popular that you're using up a huge part of the internet. So we would like you to pay for some of that bandwidth."
A better
Right,
way of
because
describing
apparently
it
their
is they distribute
viewership,
a 1 gigabyte file, and it's now basically across an entire internet thing. The
I
thing is,
think
we
that
do it very inefficiently for streaming because it makes it more efficient for our business purposes. But it's just distributing a single 1 gigabyte file across the entire population. It's not that hard. We make it more difficult than it should be.
their streaming has gone 24 times higher than anybody else. I think besides YouTube, there are the biggest company that's using, that's being streamed most.
Yeah.
And I guess they're not, they're trying to tax them to make sure, because they're not paying any different than what they used to, even though they've grown 24 times fold. So I mean, this is something else. That you were talking about Squid Game.
Internet infrastructure upgrades, but essentially with hardly any money invested into it, just
Would-
because the R&D has gotten that good, essentially every 2 quarters anyways. So essentially that capacity, if it's not going to be used by them, it'll be used by someone else. If it's not used, it's just not used. The business model for the ISP is essentially not what most people essentially are like in other markets, where you essentially have a fixed capacity. They have very, very much essentially very different stakes at play. What thing is, when people look at the graphs for who's using our network, the business people get really nervous because essentially the nerds that architected these things created them to basically scale astoundingly well, and that does not work well with the idea of limited markets and pies.
So the point I want people to contemplate is that Netflix's now most popular show in the history of Netflix has nothing to do with Hollywood at all. You Hollywood people striking, that's nice, that's fun. You're no longer the main game. We can make movies internationally in all kinds of markets and get that content, put it into our library. And unlike the movie studios who are dependent on movie theatrical releases back to back to back to back to back to back to back or die, we don't have that problem. We've got thousands of hours of content that our streamers can consume. We can take our sweet ass time. We can turn on projects from whatever country we want and greenlight whatever projects we want. We don't have to make films in Hollywood anymore. So this is going to, this negotiation of, and that's why they said, oh, if you strike, that's going to be very bad for you, because they're implying, they're hinting, we're not going to cave. So
another thing is the VFX groups have already decentralized and gone international. That happened a decade ago. Hollywood basically wanted to get the cheapest labor rates to get internationally, so they basically already decentralized all and outsourced all the VFX firms to basically be in any location worldwide that has people available to work the nightmare hours, essentially, because, oh no, we have to release by the ship date that we told everyone they're going to basically have in the marketing with things. It has to be the last final cut. So the VFX people basically get this monster project at the last moment. They have to pull quadruple overnights, burnout crunch time to finish these productions. They're paid shit wages essentially in the place they have. But you know what? They do have a very strong tech base where they learn off of. Well, guess what? They've been learning. And over the last 5-10 years, they started to ask, wait a second, why are we doing this for the studios? We're basically independent groups because they don't want to pay for our wages. They would do this to basically escape union stuff. We can work for any group worldwide that has essentially a budget to work with. So there is basically thousands of VFX firms worldwide that will basically work for anyone that's basically has a basically project to put together.
Yeah,
That
that's
sort of infrastructure was used to be the secret weapon that kept Hollywood basically
correct.
ahead of everyone else.
I'll tell you a little. I'll tell you a little fun fact about here in Turkey now, and Turkey's one of their most successful exports now is their television series, their film series, and they've been extremely successful here. And now they've been licensing, because I know the licensing firms that are licensing their films and their movies across, across the globe, especially focusing on the Middle East market, especially focusing on the Latin market. And the interesting thing is when you go and sit with them, a lot of the beginning starting, many of their series that have been extremely successful were actually originally South Korean series. So what they've done is that they license the storyline, and what they do is that they'll make them by the Turks for the Turks. And if it's successful, then the Turkish companies will continue the storyline and will continue based on their cultural aspects and stuff. So now what they've done as a result of that now they're also selling their own films, they're also selling their own series now across the platform, especially now becoming more and more popular. Their stars becoming more and more global stars, as far as the Middle East goes, as far as the Latino market goes. So a lot of that a lot of that started from, they'll admit themselves, from the South Korean markets. So that's something that's going on. Of course, the Middle East market is now trying to also get into that game and start licensing and going in there. And of course, Netflix is here. We have Netflix Turkey. We have Netflix, other countries that's trying to monetize and partner with these people here. But it's interesting to see that, and they're trying to build, for instance, the second largest or the largest Hollywood studios. Perhaps they wanted to get that Hollywood style studio set up here at a better rate, better prices here in Turkey, for instance. So, there's a lot of people that are now not looking at Hollywood as the number one go-to place for future products and future productions.
Right. And by the way, if there is a strike, this is going to be a huge benefit to content creators of all kinds, because
Yep.
especially the more professional the content creator, the better. This opens up, for example, when the last big strike that happened was in 2007 with the writers. And at that time, I was quite very close with believe it or not, the executive producer of the X-Files, Mr. Rabwin, Paul Rabwin.
You've got his music.
Yeah. So, by the way, he introduced me to Mark Snow, who's the creator of the X-Files theme song. And I nearly worked in Mark Snow's studio as his protege, the guy who wrote the X-Files theme song. And anyway, so the reason that Paul Rabwin was interested in working with me on a project was because the X-Files was about to shut down because of the writer strike. And if the writers aren't writing, you can't have shows that require writers. So you have to do documentary type work. You have to go redo old scripts.
You find out which comedians are actually funny.
Right. You redo old movies. You have to come up with all different types of content that don't require writers. Well, guess what? If this strike happens, there's no content to be made in Hollywood. None. 000. So they got to fill it with something. And what these TV or the studios and the powers that be and the streaming platforms, they're going to be on the lookout for all the non-union content producers who can produce good content of all different kinds. And that could have a really interesting effect. So you could start seeing a whole lot of semi-professional content producers getting Netflix deals of all kinds for documentaries and all kinds of stuff.
They both have leverage. That's actually something kind of cool about this, because essentially the consensus of the studio screwing them over is a kind of more shared kind of thing. So the new content creators, essentially, just by the other groups striking, it's going to mean to industry-wide practices are going to basically be raised for everyone, even the non-union groups. That's actually one of the weirder aspects about unions, is it does make it better for everyone as a thing. Now, during the time frames where they're striking, oh man, that's going to get very chaotic for a bit. There's a lot of supply chains, a lot of groups essentially, you see essentially supply chain breakdowns in semiconductors and such. There's a creative version of that for, oh yeah, has anyone purchased styrofoam this week? It's once you go on for, a couple months of strikes, that can really start to stack up on some of those shops. You start to see, things that people are just used to being able to call up, that prop person that's always available for something. that sort of thing starts to kick in, and it doesn't always come back. However, one of the things that's really beautiful about the last thing, when the writers strike, Tyler, you probably remember this with things, is when you have a bunch of writers and all of a sudden they're all together in those protest lines and picket lines and such, they basically start pitching each other all these random, crazy, long-form dramas they always wanted to do. And then all of a sudden they're able to basically have a lot more basically coherency because they're not basically being forced to basically make the latest thing that needs to be released. They could basically plan things out of it. And the long form drama became the dominant form of basic storytelling after that. We basically not just doing the one episode of the week type kind of things.
By the
So
way,
this could actually be a huge creative boost essentially over the longer term.
I'll give you an example. So when the 2007 writers' strike happened, it gave a boom to reality TV, because you don't need writers for that. You have
that was the thing.
Yeah, you have people living in a house. What's going to happen? We don't know. There's no writer writing this shit. And so you had Survivor and all kinds of game shows don't require writers. All of that shit just boomed in 2007. That's what I was working with Mr. Rabwin on, was kind of like a reality show, game show, where I'd already built a website for it and I was already doing it. I was hiding, and if you could find me, you would get $10,000. And I was updating photos every hour on my website. This was pre-Instagram, pre-social media. Actually, I was doing this, in a way.
Charles would have won that money quick.
So anyway, what happened is, long story short, Matt Damon ended up screwing me and stealing the concept and selling it to Fox. So anyway, Ben Affleck actually and Matt
Tyler,
Damon.
I'm just keeping
Pearl Street
a list
Productions.
of all the people. I'm keeping a list. Jamie's on it now. Ben Affleck.
Well, I'll send you the articles of Pearl Street Productions and them selling The Runner. They called it The Runner. Mine was called The Big Chase.
It sounds like I'm joking, but I'm totally serious.
Yeah. No, I've got all the receipts. And by the way, you want to hear a great story? So because I already had the website up and running and already had, it was a live thing. In fact, Scientific American had already done an article on it. So I'm hiding all over the place. And then Mr. Rabwin, turns out, at this time, Matt Damon and Ben Affleck were doing a show called Project Greenlight, where they were looking for hot new ideas. It was kind of like America Has Talent for Hollywood creatives. Like, if you have a hot new project, it's called Project Greenlight. We will greenlight it and help you make your project. So
they helped a lot.
Right. Well, they were working on that. I was doing my website called The Big Chase. I'm running around updating photos everywhere. It was to me, it was like a performance art tech piece because I was just using new technology to update photos wherever I happened to be running all over the place at a time before even digital cameras didn't even really exist. So it was kind of a novel thing. And then I start working, the writer's strike starting to happen. I'm talking with Rabwin over at X-Files. He loves it, and his wife is like, let's do it because we don't know how long this writer strike is going to go on for. Let's do this new media game show kind of thing that doesn't require writers. And he loved it. And then his own brother tells me, I think my brother's screwing you. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, well, Matt Damon and Ben Affleck's production company, the one of the people who won Project Greenlight is one of Mr. Rabwin's proteges. And simultaneously, that same week, Matt and Ben announced they're doing a show called The Runner, where somebody runs all over the place and the rest of the world has to catch them. I was like, well, that's interesting that Mr. Rabwin's associate producer just won Project Greenlight, and Matt and Ben are also launching my same concept. Wow, I wonder if they've been having meetings together about creative ideas. So they announced they sold it to Fox, and then I sent a letter to their production team and their attorney, their legal representative, and I said, hey, look, there's this thing called, I registered it with the Writers Guild, my treatment, my concept. Here's my registration date with the Writers Guild for this concept that you just sold to Fox. And here's my live website, and here's journalists writing about it months ago. And so I understand you just sold it to Fox, but I have the writer's treatment registered with the Writers Guild for this concept. It's live on the website here. Here's interviews about it. So I'm happy to discuss with you to settle on this issue because I own the intellectual property for this concept. And they didn't say anything, about it. And then Ben Affleck goes into Alcoholics Anonymous about 3-4 weeks later, into rehab.
Devastated him.
And then they canceled the whole show. So I don't what happened. That's it. End of discussion. They canceled the show. Then Fox canceled the whole thing. So my point is the reality boom that's going to come out of this Hollywood shutdown. You're going to see all kinds of crazy concepts with amateur content creators and documentary type things and game shows and crazy shit. Mr. Beast is probably going to do a deal with Netflix and shit like that. These really popular YouTube creators. All of the streaming platforms will likely reach out to all the top YouTube talent and to see which of those they can convert into, content for their platforms.
Ooh, and Google's paying out less ad revenue than they used to with that, so those groups are ready to jump ship for things. So if they've got some money on hand, like they could do that.
Well, the other issue is the skills. Hollywood used to have an exclusive, a monopoly on the talent and the skills to make big Hollywood movies. But due to the power of computers and software, they no longer have that monopoly on the ability to make really high production quality content. So that has become a bit decentralized, and Netflix and the other streaming platforms know this. So Hollywood has sort of lost its monopoly on its ability to be the only game in town for making blockbuster movies and series.
Tyler?
Yes.
Just to add one different perspective.
Okay.
And I'm glad you got your treatment because that was the key is IP, which is helping others in Hollywood to be able to do that. That's why they would have walked away or settled with you. But I agree with you. I remember back in the day as well. But I think diversity, just listening on the content, America, especially because this is a strike in America, it's becoming more and more diverse, especially with Hispanic population growing, that you're probably, if the strikers do strike, unfortunately, you might find other people coming in with that diverse content. Because I do watch Asian movies with subtitles, because I like them and I've been to Asia. So, but that's just me in particular. But a lot of other people are growing, and so the market isn't, just the typical American Anglo where the movies work. You're getting segments in that market, diversity. They're doing it for certain cultures. Like there's a lot of films that are African American centered specifically for that audience, or Korean or Asian or Chinese, etc. And so if you talk about the Korean population, it's growing, especially in Orange County or California. You can start seeing product, not even just what's in Korea, but also brought over here and then produced for Netflix over here. So with automation and technology, they can just outsource that and tell them, good luck to you striking, and it'll just leverage future forward.
Yeah,
we're living in a golden age of content right now. There is more stuff than you can ever possibly watch, and a lot of it's frankly exceptional. I mean, there's stuff that essentially it's less unique, maybe about maybe thing. Like there's it's a little more uniform in some ways, but I mean, we're living in a really it's a really interesting time to have this. I mean, remember essentially when there's only 10 things essentially that everyone's seen. Now it's basically become so just out there, and from different cultures, different languages, different ideas. I mean, it's nuts.
I'm just remembering that whole drama with Matt Damon and Ben Affleck when I was emailing with their attorney, and the attorney responded to me actually, and he said, "Oh no, actually we had this concept a year ago." I said, "Great, send me the date of your file number for when you registered that treatment with the Writers Guild." And I said, "If your date predates mine, please send me your address so I can send you flowers and chocolates and a sincere apology. But if my date predates yours, then let's chat." And he never sent anything, and they had to shut down. So the next one is Tinder will test in-app coins obtained by remaining active and other activities. Oh, that's interesting. You earn coins by your being active in the app. Now they're gamifying Tinder.
Is this prostitution?
Which can be used to buy perks, quote unquote perks. to boost matches. Starting in Australia is where they're going to test this. This is an interesting concept, the gamification of Tinder, where you earn coins, perhaps by by your time on the site or how many swipes you swipe through or messages you
They're
send or
gonna
whatever.
start giving out badges to, like,
This is
I
crazy.
don't even want to say
They're gamifying.
What?
You get compensated for engagement on the
you
app
get a
that you can
trophy,
then redeem for perks. That's fucking wild.
and
But a lot of
performance
these,
Literally.
trophies and stuff too.
yeah, but a lot of these apps, it was on Bloomberg with Emily Tech on Bloomberg Tech. A lot of these dating apps too are locking locking you into a subscription. So it's a brilliant strategy in my opinion, because if they get you to game it, you'll keep paying that $50 or $40 a month, even if you're dating whatever. So it's a two-way street, and this came up in one of her interviews.
Are you still at like 9 to 1 or 90, like 20 to 1, like guys to girl ratios or something like that? Like, it was insane last time I checked.
Yeah, I as you know, Sean, who is the original co-founder, Sean Rad, has come into Tech News Around the World a couple of times, and he's spoken at my events many, many, many times over the years, and we've been buddies even before Tinder. So, and he's come over to Stockholm to hang out with me on a few occasions. And by the way, he was dating a very lovely girl who worked at the Acne store on the Strandvägen or Hemgotten. Anyway, I have learned a few interesting data points about Tinder, and one of them is that, my God, is it, the ladies run that app. Yeah, I was like, it's just all in terms of a number of instigation of messages. It's the women are receiving all of the attention and just responding to it, and it's amazing how concentrated the attention is. Like the 1%, it's not even the 1%, it's like the 0.1% of both women and guys receive 99% of the inbound attention. So it's quite an interesting social dynamic on that app. Okay, next up, Qualcomm acquires Veoneer, which is a driver assistance system for autonomous vehicles, for $4.5 billion. CNBC says there's a filing that TikTok's European revenue grew 545%, so 5.5x in the past year, and their headcount grew also about 5x. And SoftBank's Vision Fund 2 is investing at twice the pace of SoftBank Vision Fund 1, growing its portfolio fivefold in the last 9 months, despite fewer staff, 20% fewer staff. That's gone from about 500 down to 400. Yet, they've done a 5x the amount of investments and a whole lot more money. And why did their managing director? They only had one managing director, and he just resigned about a week ago. What's going on over at SoftBank, which has led some people, including some people who join us regularly in this room, to predict that there's just going to be an investigation in SoftBank soon. Mark my words, on October 5th, 2021. And it is a little suspicious, all of this billions of dollars that SoftBank's throwing around like they're making it rain at a strip club on startups. So we'll see. Those are your big headlines today, October 5th. But thank you for patiently waiting. And now we get into what we've all been really brought here together to do, which is go through all of the fun, fantastic tweets that everyone's sharing, like this one from the San Francisco.
Can I share one first?
Yes, you can, Cheryl. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Sorry, give me a minute. I lost the article. You go ahead first. Sorry. No, I wanted to. Okay. Anyway, okay, let me try to remember. There's a company called Fluid IQ.
Yeah.
They got shortlisted as a finalist for the Fast Companies 2021.
Yep.
In the health so-called division. So the CEO of this company is none other than our Chris Jung. And today, in today's startup, we'll be featuring Chris Jung and his co-founders. So it will start in about 5 hours time from now. Please click on the Tech News Club and you'll be able to see the schedule there. So please come and join us and Chris to talk about himself and his co-founders and their startup. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. Good to hear Chris's story, which I've heard a bit about. And by the way, the startup he's working on is fucking fantastic. What a mind-blowingly cool thing that Chris is working on.
I wish Chris Fornoff, like I think Chris Fornoff just fell asleep, but I'm hoping I can get him in there because we met in March of 2020, right as the crisis was all going down. So me and Chris go way back virtually. And so it's so fun to have him in these rooms together because, you know, it's like, it's a small world. So if you guys see him somehow, see if you can get him in the room. I know it's very early for him, but.
Okay, next up on the tweets, San Francisco Chronicle, scientists made one woman's severe depression disappear. The process involves brain implants that interrupt her thoughts. A woman with severe treatment-resistant depression. Did she try mushrooms? Magic mushrooms? Because that's been shown to work really well. And ketamine apparently works quite well for depression as well. So treatment-resistant depression has been nearly symptom-free for a year after a team at UC San Francisco, University of California, San Francisco, the scientists implanted a device in her brain that senses when she's having depressive thoughts or impulses and interrupts them with a burst of electrical stimulation. The case is the first to demonstrate that scientists studying brain activity can identify the exact location of dysfunction in a person with depression and potentially correct it with highly targeted stimulation. Can we please make an app for this? It's called the No More Blues for You app. It's $5 a month. You just put this little sensor on your noggin, and we will make sure you don't have any more bad thoughts.
Blues be gone.
Blues away.
Blues away. Yeah, that could work. Blues be gone. Yes. Yeah, but get ready for a whole new set of, apps that are going to be based on targeting parts of your brain and controlling how you think and how you feel about everything.
Or call it Bye Bye Blues, Triple B.
And of course, it starts with the altruistic motives, which is we're going to help people who are feeling blues. And then as the technology perfects, what else can we use this for? How else can we directly change the thought processes? Yeah.
So I'm tweeting this out. This is quite a profound concept here because the Nobel Prize winners were just announced for physiology medicine, and it happens to be essentially the same area, the Nobel Prize for Physiology Medicine 2021. The discoveries will be vital to the development of treatment of chronic pain and other conditions, said Professor David Patterson, president of the Physiological Study of the United Kingdom. And here's the CNN article that I'm tweeting out right now, and it's all about they've found a part of the brain where we sense heat, cold, and touch. Where it says the two U.S.-based scientists received the Nobel Prize for describing the mechanics of how humans perceive hot, cold touch and pressure through nerve impulses from University of California, San Francisco. Oh, what do you know, Joe? Same university as the last article where they just helped a lady stop they also figured out the part of the brain that's responsible for depression and can control the impulses there. And UC San Francisco professor just won the Nobel Prize for another part of the brain where they figured out the parts responsible for perceiving hot, cold, touch, and pressure. Now imagine when your smartphone has a cable going to your brain and we start mapping out all of the parts of the brain for everything. And you put on a pair of VR goggles and oh boy, is this a realistic VR porn thing that I'm in here right here. It actually feels incredibly real, because we've mapped out the parts of the brain for the nerve endings in your genitals and everything else.
Well, it is real because you're actually feeling
At that point, it's imperceptible from reality, except that you're wearing a goggles over your eyes until we can tap into the part of the visual part of your brain and just put in the visuals in your fucking brain for you.
Bingo. That's the future of goggles.
Right. No goggles at all. It's just a cable into your head. Right. But that's
or just wireless vibes into you.
Eventually you'll have a wireless connection to a computer that will control your complete experience of reality. But what's going on right now with this whole brain-computer interfaces and these cables and Neuralink is they're busy mapping out all of your brain. And wait until quantum computers get on that task.
Yeah, and Tyler, I don't know if you covered it or maybe you're going to, but William Shatner has been invited to space via Amazon.
Yes, that's a separate
Oh.
headline that we'll get into. So it says UC San Francisco, and also from it was two people, and someone from Scripps Research in La Jolla, San Diego, across the street from UC San Diego, where I used to eat my lunch every day there. I used to go to UC San Diego, and I used to eat lunch at Scripps across the street. So, and Scripps is fantastic. That's and then you also have Salk Institute right there as well. Two amazing.
Some of the best.
Yeah. Anyway, the quote says, "Our ability to sense heat, cold, and touch is essential for survival and underpins our interaction with the world around us," the Nobel Assembly said in a statement announcing the prize. The discoveries will be vital to the development of treatments for chronic pain and other conditions, says Professor David Patterson. How we sense the temperature, touch, and movement are some of the great questions of humanity. And Thomas Perlman, the Secretary General of the Nobel Assembly, said that the discovery unlocks the secrets of nature. It explains at a molecular level how these stimuli are converted into nerve signals. It's an important and profound discovery. Indeed. And oh boy, does it have huge implications for the future of VR and the metaverse. Because if you can let people feel hot and cold and pressure, meaning touch, you can now have touch. We've now figured out the parts of the brain responsible for touch and heat and cold and pressure. That means we don't need to wear a VR suit in VR. We can stimulate the part of the brain that tells your brain you're receiving touch. You're receiving pressure, and here's how much pressure you're receiving, and it's hot or it's cold or whatnot.
That's no longer VR. That's no longer virtual reality. That's replacement reality at
Yes.
that point.
RR. Synthetic reality.
Could you
SR.
No,
imagine
not synthetic.
the movie
Replacement.
industry
That's the
with that?
point.
Say again?
I was saying, can you imagine the movie industry with that later on when you start watching, films in cinemas?
Right. Yeah, we're going to create experiences that you will actually experience, not just from a screen through your eyes and your ears, but through your brain. And you will feel like you're in another experience. And this whole thing that humans have been doing called storytelling since, the caves around the campfire, where we imagine, the story. We no longer have to imagine it. We can actually be in the story. And that could be an incredible productivity unlock as well, because every meeting you've ever had is one person trying to explain their vision to you. And now they don't need to explain their vision at all. They just bring you into it. Here, I often have to pitch my conferences to sponsors about what next year's conference is going to be like. I no longer have to do that. I can now take them there and be like, here we are. We're in the conference. This is what it's going to look like. This is what the people are going to experience. Here's the experience. You get a sneak peek at it right now. Do you want to be a partner in this or not? And then they can tell me their ideas and here's how they would change it. And magically, like a dream, it can transform into whatever they're imagining. And then I can experience their imagination. And boy, did meetings get a lot more fruitful when we can all see each other's thoughts and experience each other's thoughts.
And Tyler, my correlation to the William Shatner thing was that this was in an episode of Star Trek, which I heard in Scuttlebutt that Amazon's working on some kind of advanced Alexa of neither human computer interaction or brain computer interfaces. So that's where all this is going.
Right, but I'm it's going to be very interesting to see how fast this evolves. But the fact that somebody just won a Nobel Prize in a related field is quite amazing. And UC San Francisco, by the way, was also one of the teams that built that remote-controlled robotic prosthetic arm.
There's a guy in here that he studies the vagus nerve, and I can't quote it directly because it comes verbally through him, but he claims that the vagus nerve handles more data than the entirety of the internet. Basically the sensors built into our body through that nerve processes that much data. And I mean, I found that mind-boggling, but also plausible when you think of all the senses we're accumulating. And so I think hijacking certain inputs to the brain are going to be the future, like Carl's saying, or really we're going to be plugged into the matrix, right? That's really what's going to end up
But
being,
those are
except wireless.
those are chemical signals. They're not electrical signals.
Well, there's another huge implication as to why this team won the Nobel Prize was because they've figured out the part of the brain responsible for the sensation of touch, essentially, and pressure, which is actually the pain part of the brain as well. So they could essentially solve physical pain without opioids and whatnot. Truly amazing. Okay, so like I said, the tweets are always better than the popular news that people are sharing. And here's a whole bunch more. Dr. Fran sends in this one from Forbes. They say they have an exclusive that the government secretly orders Google to identify anyone, who has searched a name, address, and a telephone number. Government secretly orders Google to identify anyone who has searched a name, address, and telephone number. The U.S. government is secretly ordering Google to provide data on anyone typing in certain search terms. An accidentally unsealed court document shows. Oh boy. There are fears such quote-unquote keyword warrants threaten to implicate innocent web users in serious crimes and are more common than previously thought. So if you search for a term that you shouldn't have searched for, and then Google has to hand over your information to the authorities, perhaps without them even asking for it. So instead of constantly telling Google every day, we're looking for everyone who searched for this term, now anytime anyone searches for that term, you're reported.
I suppose the real worry with this is initially the concept of the fact that you search for a term being revealed to the government isn't particularly scary. Why would I care about the government knowing about this? But if that then gave them enough to initiate certain other warrants on top of that, so if, for instance, they were investigating a terrorism, as soon as you put that label on it, especially in the US system, if you put the terrorism or potential terrorism label on anything, then they have court order to access as much as they fecking want through the rest of your personal. So this could be an easy entrance into gaining further access legally through the system.
So this article says, in 2019, federal investigators in Wisconsin were hunting men they believed had participated in the trafficking and sexual abuse of a minor. She had gone missing that year, but had emerged claiming to have been kidnapped and sexually assaulted, according to a search warrant reviewed by Forbes. In an attempt to chase down the perpetrators, investigators turned to Google, asking the tech giant to provide information on anyone who had searched for the victim's name. 2 spellings of her mother's name and her address over 16 days across the year. After being asked to provide all relevant Google accounts and IP addresses of those who made the searches, Google responded with data in mid-2020, though the court documents do not reveal how many users had their data sent to the government. It's a rare example of so-called keyword warrant, with the number of search terms included, the broadest on record. Before the last one, only 2 keyword warrants had been made public. One revealed in 2020 asked for anyone who had searched for the address of an arson victim who was a witness in the government's racketeering case against singer R. Kelly. Another, detailed in 2017, revealed that a Minnesota judge signed off on a warrant asking Google to provide information on anyone who searched for a fraud victim's name from within the city of Adena, where the crime took place. While Google deals with thousands of such orders every year, the keyword warrant is one of the most contentious. In many cases, the government will already have a specific Google account that they want information on and have proof it's linked to the crime, but search term orders are effectively fishing expeditions hoping to ensnare possible suspects whose identity the government does not know. It's not dissimilar to so-called geofence warrants, where investigators ask Google to provide information on anyone within a location of a crime scene at a given time, like at the Capitol building on January 6th, where they caught everybody who was in that building due to the location of their devices. We read that headline last week. as well as all law enforcement requests. We have a rigorous process that is designed to protect the privacy of our users while supporting the important work of law enforcement, a Google spokesperson said. The latest case shows Google is continuing to comply with such controversial requests, despite concerns over their legality and the potential to implicate innocent people who happen to search for the relevant terms. From the government's perspective in Wisconsin, the scope of the warrant should have been limited enough to avoid the later. The number of people searching for the specific names, address, and phone numbers in the given time frame was likely to be low, but privacy experts are concerned about the precedent set by such warrants and the potential for any such order to be a breach of Fourth Amendment protections from unreasonable searches. There are also concerns about First Amendment freedom of speech issues, given the potential to cause anxiety amongst Google users that their identities could be handed to the government because of what they searched for.
I think that's crazy. I mean, I think it's Google. Everybody, if any kind of article, whether it's in mass media or smaller articles or local papers or anything, I mean, it's not going to be uncommon to search a name if you're reading or coming across it to see, well, who are they? What is this about? What's their background? So, I mean, these are probably going to be, on some names. I mean, think about it. If this was happening during 9/11, how many people searched bin Laden? So does that mean that you got millions of people finding out who the bin Laden family was? And, I mean, I'm sure it's just you're looking for specifics, and maybe on some of the smaller cases, the smaller, um, cases, maybe that it's going to be different because there's not going to be that many. But on some of the larger terms, it's going to be crazy. I mean, I myself have gone through so many searches through Google and I'm curious about something that I read or a name just to see what the background is on it. I mean, how are they going to decipher through all that?
And it's important to remember as well that, like Snowden showed, especially with the likes of the NSA, it's not just, to Nida's point, it's not just your data, it's not just about you, because as soon as they get an in on you, as soon as they can logically claim, look, we have a vested interest in finding out who this person is and what they've been doing, because look at these key search results, that also gives them, through the US system, that also gives them access to any of your immediate contacts. So it's like a spider web that goes out from that one moment of you searching a specific thing at the wrong time that happens to pop up. They can say, well, look, this gives us legitimate interest to actually investigate this, and anybody they might be talking to.
Okay. Moving right along. From Shirok, from Wired, AI wrote better phishing emails than humans in a recent test. Researchers found that tools like OpenAI's GPT-3 help craft devilishly effective spear phishing messages to trick people into giving their passwords or clicking on a nefarious link better than humans can. So, yet another area where the AI is getting better than humans. Get ready, songwriting's coming soon. And the next one, I believe Vinay just sent this one in from Nikkei Japan. Malaysia summons Chinese ambassador over South China Sea vessels. The Malaysian government summoned China's ambassador to formally protest alleged encroachment into its South China Sea waters by Chinese vessels, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs said on Tuesday. And boy, there's, oh my goodness, we can't touch on that one without touching on this other one that the Taiwan is now saying they are preparing for war. Their foreign minister says, we are preparing for war with China and we're asking for your help. And they specifically asked for Australia for help. Let me pull that up for you. Here it is. Here's the headline. Taiwan asks Australia for help to prepare for war for China is the actual headline. Joseph Wu urges Australia to increase intelligence sharing and security operation with Taiwan and says the island is ready to defend itself. Taiwan's foreign minister warns his nation is preparing for war with China and urges Australia to increase intelligence sharing and security cooperation as Beijing intensifies a campaign of military intimidation. If China, here's his quote, if China is going to launch a war against Taiwan, we will fight to the end, and that is our commitment. So things escalating over there in the South China Seas, is to put it mildly.
Tyler, I believe that
Scary now. Even
Taiwan
for
has
somebody separated.
yeah, Taiwan has a proposal to form a commonwealth between it and South Korea and Japan. to help defend itself.
Well, Japan is already committed to defending it because it has islands 100 kilometers off the coast of Taiwan, and if China takes Taiwan, then you have China 100 kilometers from Japan, and that's a defensive. You know, they can take proactive defense against that island.
Can anybody see a future where China actually backs down on this?
No. Actually, we had somebody in the room yesterday that Cheryl brought in, who's a real.
He was magnificent. Yeah, I can't remember Matthew. I can't
Yeah,
remember, but
real
he was
smart
great.
dude
Yeah,
on this topic.
Stefan.
And I believe he made the point, or somebody else did, that basically, if in the event that anyone recognizes Taiwan officially, that it would force Xi into a political tightrope or box that he cannot get out of. He would have to prove everything that he's been saying for years now, that that they're going to take back Taiwan, and if it would force him to do it, basically, politically. He would
because
either
the alternative is an admission of weakness, which
right,
absolutely categorically they cannot do. They
right.
cannot admit that
He would
they
have
were
to
wrong.
resign or counter with trying to take back Taiwan.
And
So the
Tyler, did
best
you
thing
cover the
is to
war?
keep status quo. Don't try to aggravate, and on any side.
Tyler, did you cover the war games that took place from Friday to Sunday yesterday?
No.
Oh, about 17 ships were into Taiwan around that area. So, yeah, this is from the defense side. We've been there's been a lot of escalation since Friday, and so I think it's beginning to split. You know, if China actually does do this in the next, I would say, 6 months, what's going to happen with NATO and who's going to counter and so forth. But yeah, it's out there. I'll try to find. But there's been a lot of activity, a lot. I'm talking about military drills and simulating. There were simulations of Chinese taking out American ships and destroying them, et cetera, during the war games. So that's what's going right inside of Taiwan. And I think it was, I don't know if it's Malaysia or Indonesia, one of the prime ministers is stating, you crossed over our territorial waters. Why are you doing this? But yeah, it's a big escalation in 3 days.
Okay. So next up is this one. That rogue Americans stashed assets offshores, eluding victims and impeding investigations by hiding their money in Belize. That's one of the revelations from the new Pandora Papers, is that a bunch of people put money in Belize to hide it. And then Ken sends in this one from Newsweek, that 1.5 billion Facebook users, that's about half of them, personal information posted for sale after a hack. The information posted by hackers appeared to be legitimate, but there is reason to suspect that it might have been a scam, according to Newsweek. Then Evan sends in this one. Speaking of China, Chinese space tourism firm pulls inspiration from SpaceX, with inspiration in quotation marks because it's a copy. So, but that's just sort of as one would expect, I guess. So, and they show photos of how inspired it is. And then,
Tyler,
yes,
back to the Belize
yes,
article. There was an article this morning, I think it was in the Washington Post, if I'm not mistaken, basically showing with these new, I forget what they're calling them, not the Panama Papers, something else, that most of the offshore activity is actually been redirected back into the U.S. And the U.S. is now the new offshore haven of the world.
South Dakota, yeah?
One of the states.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think.
Okay. And next one here is from Sharok, that Tesla lawsuit puts EV startup Rivian in its crosshairs. And Rivian is the closest, it's Jeff Bezos's EV company, and Elon has Tesla, and Rivian makes a truck now. They just rolled off their first vehicle, which is a truck. And the headline says Tesla lawsuit aimed at Rivian. Rivian's is an exciting startup with impressive electric vehicles and even more remarkable fundraising abilities. However, while there is a praise for Rivian's new fully electric R1T pickup truck as it finally hits the market, Tesla isn't quite so stoked. According to Bloomberg, the automaker recently expanded a lawsuit to initially filed last year, claiming that Rivian has stolen patent and trade secrets. Tesla initially filed the suit in 2020, stating that Rivian was poaching people and information. The expanded lawsuit now alleges that the effort did not deter Rivian and claims that the automaker has accelerated its illegal activities in the months since. Tesla notes one incident from the summer in which departing employees were caught red-handed pilfering information on its next-generation battery tech. In late September, a judge ruled that expanding the scope of the case is efficient at this juncture, but made clear that his decision is not a judgment of the suit's claim one way or the other. Rivian retorts, for its part, is throwing shade in return. In one aspect of its response to Tesla's claims, Rivian states that the automaker has provided so little detail that Rivian is unable to ascertain what Tesla is claiming as its intellectual property, let alone whether what it is claiming is or could be secret. Yeah, well, they're not going to reveal it in the court filing. So there's that. And then the next one is also about Tesla from the New York Times. And the New York Times headline says, a jury orders Tesla to pay $137 million to a former Tesla employee over racist treatment. A jury agreed with Owen Diaz that Tesla had created a hostile work environment at its factory in Fremont, California. So he got $137 million. And Craig Nielsen sends in this one from Vice that a company that routes billions of text messages quietly says it was hacked. Yep, we covered that one. Syniverse. And BB sends in this one from South China Morning Post that China's mobile carriers to launch a new 5G messaging service. China Mobile, China Telecom, and China Unicom, which are the three big telecoms in China, are expected to roll out their new 5G messaging service with electronic payment function this month. Could potentially compete with Tencent's super app WeChat, which is how people pay for things currently. And BB sends in this one from...
What does 5G have to do with this?
Say again?
What does 5G has to do with this?
It just makes it easier to get the press to wake up, I guess.
Sean, it's more secure. If you're talking payments, peer-to-peer networks and peer-to-peer on site without blockchain or crypto, 5G at the latency speed is much more secure if you're doing it that way. And I think this has to do with Huawei and what they're really doing. And their CFO, I think she's on her way back to China soon. So from Canada, but 5G on the platform itself, the speed, and if you have an AI background or something, it makes it hard for third-party actors to intercept anything.
But we are doing all sorts of transactions now with existing LTE, and doesn't seem to be like a really big problem.
No, I know. I was just saying, well, if some of the cyber hackers, because I'm just doing something on cybersecurity and artificial intelligence as well, if they're able to hack that latency, that speed, it's just like high-frequency trading used to be, right? The closer you were to the networks and next to the stock exchange, you could actually manipulate, in sub-seconds. So if you're talking about machine learning, 5G kind of puts another layer there. That's all I'm saying.
So somebody named Jordan Scales is on Twitter, and his Twitter bio says, author of critically acclaimed Harry Potter series of children's fantasy novels. Huh? That can't be right. So maybe this is bullshit. Is tweeting out, and I'll retweet it just for giggles, although take it with a grain of salt. He says, absolutely wild insider info from a friend who works at Facebook, and saying that this friend from Facebook was direct messaging with somebody, and the conversation goes as follows, revealing the source of the problem with the outage hours ago. It says it was a fucking code review bot that auto merged a BGP rule. And the friend says, "Oh my God, are you serious?" And he says, "Yes." And no one caught it for 2 hours. And the friend says, "Wild that a bot could cause this."
I can 100% believe this.
Can you explain it some more for us?
Like, so when you have the amount of repositories, version control, we were talking about GitLab earlier, there has to be a place where you store the code for the different products that you're doing. And peer review is a process where you have certain members of your team that are working on features, that are working on releases and hotfixes and bugs and whatnot. And then you have parts of your team whose job it is to go over that and review that, basically. When you have that creates this process where you can see the comparison of what the code was before and then what the code will be afterwards. That's called a peer review. When you have hundreds of these, they can stack up, and some of them, because you're talking about code, because it's a mathematical process almost. You can automate a lot of it because you can say if this is this and that is that, and we can deem this as safe and this is non sort of explosive. We can automate this. So certain things like security fixes and whatnot. If you stick to proper tagging and versioning controls and versions, you can say, look, if this is a security fix and it's important, then just do this automatically. So if you're a smaller company, you can do this, and it's not particularly dangerous because you might have 1,000 customers, 10,000 customers, 100,000 customers, and if it does go wrong, you can get it fixed quickly. I don't know what Facebook uses in automatic deployment, but that's essentially like the summary of this. Basically, you want to automate as much as you can, and sometimes it goes fucking wrong. And they're not really checked and watched over because they're deemed to be safe and low danger level.
And Carl, do you think that factored into the engineers being locked out as well?
Well, not a clue, because it depends entirely on what it was that was released. I mean, I stayed quiet this morning. The summary that Michelle gave and that everybody else gave kind of lined up with everything that I'd seen, that it was to do with the routing service, and that it locked them out remotely. This question is, how did that happen, not what happened.
Okay, here we go. Next up, will we be ready for the EV transition? The UK is preparing for the ban of new sales of petrol and diesel vehicles in 2030, but will we be ready for the switch? It's a good question. We're going to need a lot of electricity. And the next one from BB from Nikkei Japan says that China's Geely, which owns Volvo, which in a separate headline today says they're going to IPO, but China's Geely builds satellites to guide autonomous vehicles. Spacecraft will power communication and navigation network, which makes perfect sense. Mass production has begun in Taizhou province, marking an entry by China's latest privately owned automaker into a field long dominated by the military. And next up is actually a video of a bunch of, also from China, a drone show gone bad where all the drones they were doing a colorful sky, light display. And then the drones start landing, hundreds of drones landing simultaneously on a crowd of people.
Tyler,
Yeah.
you just mentioned about that the UK will abolish petrol and diesel vehicles by 2030.
Right.
Well, there's a report come out today, I think, or yesterday, which is talking about that 70% or more than 70% of all the emission in the world is created by the top 100 companies. Till they sort it out, what's the point of us little me trying to do anything for the environment? Because it makes no difference if 70% of the emission is coming from 100 top companies. I'll tweet it out later today.
Okay. Thanks for that. And here we go. French report finds over 300,000 children were victims of sex abuse in Catholic Church. From DW out of Germany, a French commission has released an exhaustive report uncovering 70 years of child sex abuse in the country's Catholic Church. The 2.5 year probe looked at church, court, press, and police files.
Sick and sad, and that's just one country. That's just
exactly right. It's just one country. Because Ireland would say they have, and I'm sure Ireland and France are not unique in this kind of just unbelievable. How do they, as if Facebook is harming kids? How does the Catholic Church still exist under headlines like this? Unbelievable. So next one is from CNN, from BB. 2 prolific ransomware operators arrested in the Ukraine. Surprise, surprise. Oh, what a shock that is. And let me guess, they might be Russians? 2 prolific ransomware operators arrested in Ukraine. Europol announces. U.S. and European enforcement agencies last week arrested 2 people in the Ukraine who have allegedly made multi-million-dollar ransom demands. Where did the article go? There you are. And let me pause the audio on that. There we go. Multi-million-dollar ransom demands following hacks of European and U.S. organizations. The FBI and law enforcement agencies in France and Ukraine coordinated the raid, which led to the seizures of $375,000 in cash and 2 luxury vehicles and the freezing of $1.3 million in cryptocurrencies. The arrests are a notable win for U.S. law enforcement, which has tried to step up pressure on cyber criminals based in Eastern Europe and Russia following a series of ransomware attacks that have cost the U.S. companies millions of dollars. Europol describes the 2 suspects as prolific, having demanded between 5 and 70 million euros from victims. But the spokesperson for the EU's law enforcement arm declined to identify the 2 people or what type of ransomware they allegedly used, citing legal reasons and ongoing investigation. The organized crime group is suspected of having committed a string of targeted attacks against very large industrial groups in Europe and North America from April 2020 onward, says Europol spokesperson. 4 FBI personnel were in Ukraine to help coordinate the raid. According to the Europol statements, the FBI did not respond to a question for comment. Mark Arena, CEO of cybersecurity firm Intel 471, said he believed the 2 people arrested were affiliates rather than core operators of well-known ransomware service. A number of actors use or have used multiple ransomware services. Hence, we caution against any linking of this action to single specific ransomware service. Ukraine has proven to be willing and committed to arrest ransomware criminals within its borders, something which has been a bigger challenge with Russia. Fokker, who is now head of cyber investigations at McAfee, told CNN. President Joe Biden in June urged Russian President Vladimir Putin to crack down on cyber criminals operating from Russian soil. But U.S. officials have been skeptical of Moscow's willingness to do so. And perhaps they moved to the Ukraine. I'll make a little prediction here that these 2 individuals who were caught, when they are revealed, will be Russian, who moved to Ukraine because Putin said, you can go ahead and keep doing this. Please, keep doing it. Just don't do it from Russia so that we can deny that you're doing it. And we have good evidence to support my prediction. So we will see. If anyone would like to make a little wager with me, I would happily wager with you. So next one is the FDA publicly lists ingredients in approved COVID-19 vaccines. According to public health officials, all the ingredients used in the 3 COVID-19 vaccines approved by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration are now listed on the FDA's website. Public health officials and fact checkers confirm. One FDA report, redacted an ingredient found in the Pfizer COVID-19 vaccine, but the FDA has since reversed that action and has disclosed that the redacted ingredient was salt water. PolitiFact and Lead Stories report. So now that the ingredients are publicly listed for Moderna and Pfizer and what's the other one? AstraZeneca, I guess, or J&J, almost certainly, because that's American. What are we to make of people who were trying to claim all kinds of, fun things about the ingredients of the vaccines?
Can you call it a list if the only ingredient is 5G?
Is 5G?
I saw an affidavit that was written by Lieutenant Colonel. I don't have her name in front of me. Actually, yesterday, a friend of mine sent it to me, and it was really, really damning report. And she was, I think, one of the highest levels of basically doing their testings and making sure that everything's okay for their quote-unquote fighting force for the U.S. military. And she was basically bringing down the ingredients and discussing why. And it was a huge, long affidavit on why this is not necessary and why it shouldn't be used on anybody and everybody just, across the map. And she lists all the reasons. It was a really damning report towards the military. And she was basically including other doctors within the military saying why, if we can't use these blindly on every single person within our fighting force, that this is something that should not be just given to anybody and everybody without having more information or finding more information about their background, their genetics, and their makeup before getting the vaccines. It was a very damning report, and it was just interesting to see what's going to happen. I think she wrote it and delivered it maybe about 4 or 5 days ago.
Okay. Next up, here we go, is from Poppy from New York Times. Headline says, a Nobel Prize that might have been. A recent study of black holes has confirmed a fundamental prediction made by Stephen Hawking nearly 5 decades ago. Did death cheat Stephen Hawking out of a Nobel Prize? Yeah, almost certainly. And here's a big news from Craig in the audience. Brazil set to adopt Bitcoin as its legal tender. Where is May? I can hear her jumping up and down.
Pew, 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 pew.
Okay,
You got
I can
me.
jump in. I can jump in
And
and
did you
throw a
see there was another country as well, Tyler? And it's really interesting because it wasn't in Latin America. I think it was in Africa, the African continent.
Okay.
But I'm not sure. I saw it in my reading and my rabbit hole research. But yeah, super excited. Pew, pew, pew.
Craig wanted to jump in. Yeah.
Sorry, Craig.
No, I'm sorry. A little bit of cold water on this story. The headline might be a little bit misleading. There's clearly one representative of the House in Brazil that wants this to happen, but it's unclear what the bill actually says, and if the Congress will actually approve this.
Tyler.
So I'm sorry, Craig. Can you repeat that?
Yeah, sorry, the VPN is probably messing up. A little bit of cold water on this story, in that there's clearly one Brazilian House of Representative person, Ribeiro, I think is his name, who wants this bill to happen, but it's unclear what is actually the text in the bill and if it states what this article is saying. So it's got a ways to go before it gets adopted.
Tyler?
Yes.
Could I share some past news? Because
Sure.
we've been talking about this and it's going to probably put fire underneath what Craig just said. Visa considers accepting crypto as payment in Brazil, and that was from September 9th. And as we all just know from recently, Visa's building on bridges. So Eduardo Abreu, vice president of new business at Visa, said he wants to look into integrating Bitcoin as well as other digital coins as a method of payment or as a way of storing value. Abreu is reportedly building on ideas introduced earlier by Fernando Teles, the Visa's CEO of Brazil, who wanted to adopt API and tokenized payments. Great advantage of adopting Bitcoin, without a doubt, is its ease. Without needing to exchange a fiat currency, this is optimization of exchanges when using Bitcoin. Brazilians already have the culture of receiving card points, miles, discounts, etc. Why not receive cryptocurrencies with their credit card as well? So there you go.
Okay. So next one up is, thank you for that one, Craig, the powerful CH-6 drone debuts at Airshow China 2021. China unveiled a new unmanned aerial vehicle system on Tuesday. It's a drone that carries lots of missiles. So an unmanned drone with a whole lot of missiles. And Poppy sends in this one from The Guardian, that robots stealing our jobs or solving labor shortages. From fast food to farming, COVID-19 has accelerated the rise of the worker robots. This in turn will put more jobs at risk and makes the need to reframe the discussion around robots. So now The Guardian's getting in on this. Makes the need to reframe society ever more urgent. And it's a very long article. And yes, we're going to replace everybody with these very soon. You can see them now in San Francisco. Cafe X uses robotic arms in replacement of baristas. Cali Burgers has an entire restaurant of just robotic arms. And the price of these robotic arms are dropping like computers did in the 80s and 90s. And they're going to get very, very cheap and very, very easy to use. Far cheaper than having humans do the work they do in pretty much every retail shop and wholesale. I mean, this is just going to become a very big problem. So get ready. And now The Guardian's writing about it. And the next one is from Alexandra, that the Fed prepares to launch review of possible central bank digital currency. From the Wall Street Journal. Fed officials are divided on the matter, making it unlikely they will decide soon on whether to create a digital dollar. The next one's also from Alexandra, from Reuters. New Zealand abandoned its long-standing strategy of eliminating coronavirus amid a persistent Delta outbreak, just like Thailand did exactly the same, and will instead look to live with the virus and control its spread as its vaccination rate rises. Yep, that's pretty much true throughout Asia. And the next one is MIT Fab Lab does it again. MIT's new robotics center may usher in our cyborg future, is the article. They're going very big on AI, 5G, and kind of robotic hands and whatnot. Ooh, I forgot to retweet that one. Let me send that one to the Tech News Twitter account so you can enjoy that one. And then BB sends in this one from South China Morning Post, that Apple's loss of a small legal battle in China might spell big trouble. Big trouble in Little China. Supreme People's Court in China ruled that a lawsuit filed by a Chinese consumer against Apple's China entity on antitrust grounds can proceed. And Ken sends in this one. That Activision Blizzard could have a serious problem beyond its culture crisis, which is its games. Call of Duty and World of Warcraft may falter, according to Bloomberg. And David Crace sends in this one from the Brookings Institute, that the meta challenges of the metaverse, rather than being distracted by the shiny new bubble of the metaverse, policymakers need to focus on the underlying and unsolved problems of tech more generally, like privacy and all these issues, before we get into the metaverse. And then Evan sends in this one from Fast Company. The headline says, as an immigrant, I was failed by the U.S. banks, so I started my own neobank. An array of communities are treated poorly by a traditional banking system. New banks tailored to their needs are filling the gap. Yes, absolutely. There are new digital banks specifically for different demographics, like the creator economy, like the silver economy, like the African American, the Black community, like the LGBTQ community. They're going to have their own banks, their own banking apps that tailor products and services to their needs. Because that's how apps work. So next one's from Sergey from NPR. What the Pandora Papers show about how the powerful hide money from public. The global investigation sheds new light on how the world's wealthy use a network of lawyers and financial institutions to obscure their finances from authorities. So just sent that out. And then from the New York Times, a pacemaker for the brain. No treatment helped her depression until this new device from UC San Francisco, which we talked about an hour ago. And they say it's the first study of an individualized brain stimulation to treat severe depression. And it talks about the person and how they're dealing with it. Quite an amazing innovation. The next one,
I like that analogy of the pacemaker of the brain, just to sort of give it a light shock and break it out of the cycles, the repetitive patterns that the brain is in, because that's the fundamentals of meditation, isn't it? It's you get these repeating patterns, especially with depression and anger and jealousy and that kind of thing, that just go over and over and over and over in your mind. And I like the idea of this pacemaker just to give it a light, sort of jolt and break it out of that pattern so the brain can reset. That's pretty cool.
Okay, Evan sends in this one from The Guardian. Who scams the scammers? Meet the scam baiters. Police struggle to catch online fraudsters, often operating from overseas, but now a new breed of amateurs are taking matters into their own hands. And
if anybody hasn't watched the series from Mark Robert on this, he works with another YouTuber whose name I cannot remember, but the two of them have actually been working on this for Jim Browning, I think it might be. They've been working on this for a couple of years now, actually tracking, scamming cartels all the way over to India and backtracing their IP addresses and hunting them down on social media and whatnot, and then handing all of their information over to local operatives and US operatives. It's a really, really good series by Mark Rober, and it really highlights how, if you've ever wondered how old people get pulled in on some of these scams and end up sending like $33,000, and you think, well, how the hell can anybody, even an older person, be so stupid as to send over $33,000 accidentally? It's actually really, really clever how they do it, and they break it down, and it's an amazing series. I urge everybody to sort of go and watch it, and it'll help you protect your own elderly folks as well.
Okay, and last but not least, we got through all the tweets today. This one from Ame from Decrypt. Not just Bitcoin, Bank of America bullish on Ethereum, DeFi, and NFTs. The latest blockchain and crypto industry report from Bank of America is largely glowing, calling it the most exciting new market in years. We did it. We made it through all the tweets. Happy Tuesday, everybody. We will meet again in
4 hours.
Oh, yeah. Yes, Cheryl has the room with Chris Young in 4 hours. And then that goes for an hour and a half, and then we do tech news, yeah?
Yes.
Perfect.
Excellent.
See you